Hey everyone, and welcome to Nighttime Stories. I'm here to help you drift off into a peaceful sleep. Let me know where you're watching from. I always love seeing how far these stories reach. Now, get comfortable and relax. When my aunt passed away, I was left with her old house in Vermont. I had not visited it since I was a kid, and walking back into it after so many years felt more like entering a stranger's place than a relative's. The air smelled stale, like damp wood and dust, and the whole house carried that weight of neglect, of time settling into the boards. I had taken a week off work to clean the place up, sort through what needed to be donated or thrown away, and maybe decide whether I would sell it or keep it. The house was 3 stories if you counted the attic, with narrow staircases and small windows that let in more shadow than light. I spent most of the first 2 days on the lower floors, going through her kitchen, her bedroom, and her endless collection of porcelain figurines. It was boring but comforting, the kind of mindless work where the only sound is the scrape of a broom or the rustle of cardboard boxes. It was on the 3rd afternoon, when I decided to tackle the attic, that things shifted. The attic stairs were hidden behind a narrow door at the end of the upstairs hallway. The door stuck at first, like it had swelled into the frame, and it took a hard shove with my shoulder to get it open. The smell hit me immediately, that dry old dust mixed with something faintly sour, like forgotten apples. The attic itself was larger than I remembered. Sloped ceiling, low beams I had to duck under, and piles of covered furniture huddled beneath stained sheets. The light bulb hanging from the center of the ceiling buzzed weakly when I pulled the string, giving just enough illumination to cast long shadows. It felt like stepping into a frozen time capsule, except everything was draped and muffled, as if someone wanted to hide the past away. That was when I saw it. Against the far wall, taller than me, was a mirror covered with a heavy cloth. It leaned slightly forward, as if it was too big to stand completely upright without toppling. For a moment I did not think much of it. People cover mirrors when they store them, to keep the glass from scratching or collecting dust, but something about it made me pause. The cloth was not the same dusty white as the other sheets. It was dark gray, thick, almost like canvas, and tied loosely around the mirror's frame with an old cord. I walked closer, brushing cobwebs from my face, and stood in front of it. The thing was enormous, the kind of mirror you would expect in a grand hallway or ballroom, not in a modest old house. The cloth clung to the shape of it like it had not been moved in decades. I hesitated before touching it. There was no real reason for me to feel nervous. It was just a mirror, after all, but I found myself standing there longer than I meant to, studying the outline beneath the cloth, as if I might see movement. My fingers brushed the edge, and the fabric felt damp, though the rest of the attic was bone dry. I tugged the cloth down slowly. Dust exploded into the air, and I coughed as it settled. Beneath was the mirror, its frame carved with intricate patterns of vines and leaves, though tarnished and chipped in places. The glass itself was surprisingly clear. Not cracked, not cloudy like old mirrors tend to get. For a second I only saw myself, hair messy from cleaning, t-shirt streaked with dust, eyes tired. But the longer I stared, the heavier the silence became. The air in the attic pressed against my ears, the faint hum of the bulb seemed to dull. It felt like waiting for something. I shook my head, laughed quietly at myself, and draped the cloth back over the glass. The rest of the day passed uneventfully. I packed a few boxes, found some old yearbooks and letters, and dragged them downstairs. But all night, even while brushing my teeth or lying in bed, I kept picturing that mirror standing there in the attic, covered now, but present, too big to ignore. The next morning, with sunlight pouring through the kitchen windows, I told myself it was ridiculous to feel uneasy about furniture. I carried up a fresh sheet from the linen closet, cleaner than the damp cloth, and replaced the covering. This time, though, I let myself look a little longer at the glass. That was when I noticed it. The reflection was fine at first, but when I raised my hand to adjust my hair, I swear the mirrored version of me lagged, only for the briefest fraction of a second, like a video out of sync. I froze, staring. I tried again, waved my hand, turned my head. Each time, it followed, but just slightly behind, enough for me to notice, enough to twist something deep in my stomach. I told myself it was my imagination. Maybe the glass was warped. Maybe my eyes were tired. I laughed nervously in the empty attic, trying to force the unease away. But when I walked out of the attic and pulled the door shut behind me, I could not shake the image of my reflection moving after I already had. That night, lying in bed, I thought I heard faint noises above me. The attic creaked like old wood does, but this sounded different. It was subtle, irregular, like someone shifting their weight slowly, trying not to be heard. I told myself it was mice. It had to be mice. Still, I pulled the covers higher and shut my eyes tighter, listening to my own pulse echoing in my ears. The following day, I avoided the attic as long as I could. I busied myself with cleaning the downstairs rooms, hauling more trash bags to the car. But eventually I needed something I had left in one of the boxes up there. I climbed the stairs reluctantly, every step heavier than the last. When I opened the attic door, the air felt colder, sharper, like the temperature had dropped. The sheet I had draped over the mirror was shifted, sagging slightly to one side. I stood there staring at it for a long time, debating whether to fix it or just leave. My curiosity won out. I stepped closer and adjusted the fabric, and for a split second my eyes flicked to the glass. I was already standing straight. My arms were at my sides, but the reflection lingered, my own image still bent over, reaching for the cloth, even after I had already moved. It caught up a second later, snapping back into alignment with me. I stepped back, breath quick, heart hammering. The attic felt too quiet, too watchful. I left the mirror covered and hurried downstairs, convincing myself that I had seen wrong, that my mind was playing tricks after too many dusty hours in this place. But that night, I dreamed of the attic. The bulb buzzing, the sheet slipping, the reflection waiting, always just behind. And when I woke up in the dark, I could not shake the feeling that something upstairs was still awake, still watching, waiting for me to come back. The morning after that dream, I moved slower than usual. Coffee did little to chase away the heaviness in my chest. I kept telling myself it was just the weight of grief, the fatigue from cleaning, the strange loneliness of being in a house where someone had lived and died. But every time I walked down the upstairs hallway, my eyes caught on that attic door, and it felt like standing too close to a live wire. I avoided going up there for as long as I could. There was plenty of work left in the basement and on the lower floors. The house had been closed up for so long that every corner needed sweeping, every drawer needed sorting. I told myself the mirror could wait. It was just an old piece of furniture, strange only because I had let my imagination get the better of me. Still, by late afternoon, I found myself standing at the bottom of the narrow attic stairs, my hand on the banister. It felt childish to hesitate. I pushed the door open and climbed up quickly, determined to grab the box I needed and get out. The air was cooler again, just like before, but sharper now, like I had walked into a different season altogether. The sheet still hung over the mirror, though the edges looked uneven, as if it had shifted during the night. My skin prickled. I kept my eyes down, rummaging through the boxes stacked near the stairs until I found the one with old family records. As I lifted it, something made me glance sideways, and that was enough. I saw it clearly this time. The reflection was visible even through the draped fabric. The sheet should have blocked it entirely, but faintly, I could see myself standing there. Not identical. Delayed again. The outline was blurred, as if seen through water, but it was undeniably me. I dropped the box and staggered back. The thud echoed, and for a moment it was like the attic swallowed the sound whole. My reflection in that faint haze did not startle like I did. It simply stood still, arms loose at its sides, its head tilted slightly as if curious. I pulled the sheet tighter around the frame, hands shaking, and backed toward the door. My mind ran in frantic circles, searching for some explanation, a trick of the light, my eyes adjusting wrong. Fatigue. But even as I told myself those things, I knew none of them explained why the reflection had not moved the same way I had. That night, I tried not to think about it. I buried myself in paperwork, sipping cheap wine until my body relaxed. I forced myself to sleep on the couch downstairs, telling myself I would deal with the attic another day. But around 2 a.m, I woke with a start. The sound was faint at first, but it grew clearer as I listened. Soft creaks, slow, deliberate, like someone shifting weight above me. My heart pounded. I stared at the ceiling, every muscle tense, certain that if I kept perfectly still it might stop. But the noise continued. Step, pause, step, then silence. So sudden it made the silence ring in my ears. I sat up, holding my breath. The house was black around me. My phone read 2:28. I told myself again it was just the house settling. Old wood did that. It was nothing more than that. But I could not shake the certainty that something had been moving up there, careful and slow, listening for me. The next day, I made a decision. I would move the mirror out of the house altogether. Whatever weird energy it carried, I wanted it gone. I found a pair of old gloves in the garage and went upstairs. My plan was simple: cover the mirror again, drag it carefully to the hallway, and somehow wrestle it into the back of my car. I could dump it at the donation center, let it become someone else's problem. When I entered the attic, though, I froze. The sheet was gone. It lay crumpled on the floor beside the mirror, as if tossed aside. The glass gleamed in the dim light, waiting. I should have turned and left right then, but I stepped closer. My breath fogged faintly in the air. I stood before the mirror, gloves on, ready to grip the frame. But then I saw myself in it, and saw the delay again. I lifted my hand to touch the glass, but the reflection was slower, hesitating, then catching up. When I let my hand fall, it kept its hand raised for a moment too long, palm pressed against the inside of the glass. That was when I realized I could see the lines of its face more clearly. Not just me, not exactly. The features were mine, yes, but off in subtle ways. My jaw a little sharper, my eyes slightly darker, and when its lips twitched into the faintest curve of a smile, mine did not. I stumbled back, heart hammering. The box I had left on the floor was still there. I grabbed it, almost tripping over the sheet, and fled down the stairs. I slammed the attic door shut behind me, chest heaving. The rest of the day I spent outside, cleaning the overgrown yard, anything to keep from going back inside. The sun felt good, grounding. I told myself that maybe I would call someone to help me move the mirror tomorrow. Maybe I would even pay someone to haul it off. But when night came, I could not bring myself to fall asleep. I left all the lights on. The house hummed faintly, alive with electricity, but I still heard it. Around 3 a.m, the ceiling creaked again. Step, pause, step. I gripped the blanket tight, staring up, certain that whatever stood in front of that mirror was no longer waiting for me to come to it. I forced myself through the next morning, bleary-eyed, half alive on coffee. I avoided the attic entirely, but as I sat at the kitchen table, sorting through papers, I felt the oddest sensation, like eyes pressing into the back of my skull. I turned, quickly, but the kitchen was empty. The sensation lingered. It was not paranoia. It was awareness. That evening, I caught myself glancing at the attic door again and again. I knew I would have to open it eventually. And worse, I knew the reflection would be waiting, watching. By the time night fell, I sat in the living room, wide awake, listening for the creaks above. I thought I saw movement in the hallway shadows once or twice, but each time I convinced myself it was just exhaustion. Still, I could not shake the certainty growing in me. The reflection was not just a quirk of glass. It was something else, and it had learned to look like me. And maybe, just maybe, it was practicing. The third night I stayed in that house was the one where I stopped pretending this was all in my head. Until then, I had managed to rationalize the strangeness. The cold air, the creaking above my bed, the delayed reflection. All of it could be blamed on stress, fatigue, even faulty old glass. But that night something happened that left no room for comforting explanations. I was in the upstairs bathroom brushing my teeth, staring at myself in the mirror over the sink. It was small, square, and mounted crookedly above the faucet. I had always hated brushing in silence, so I hummed under my breath, nothing particular, just noise to break the quiet. As I leaned down to spit into the sink, I caught something in the corner of my eye. My reflection did not move. I froze. My real body straightened, toothbrush still in hand, foam gathering at the corners of my mouth. The reflection stayed bent over, unmoving, the toothbrush still hovering near its lips. Then, slowly, it lifted its head. My stomach dropped. The reflection was not smiling, but its eyes seemed darker, as if the pupils had spread wide, drowning out the color. I staggered back and dropped the toothbrush into the sink. My reflection did not follow the motion. It only blinked once, deliberately, then caught up all at once, as if the scene had fast-forwarded to match me. I slammed the bathroom light off and fled to the hallway. I told myself it was just exhaustion playing tricks, but I could still see the delayed face burned into my mind. And I realized something important in that moment. The bathroom mirror was not the problem. It had never been. The thing in the attic was bleeding into every reflective surface in the house. Sleep was out of the question after that. I sat up in bed with a lamp on, trying to distract myself with paperwork. But at some point the lamp flickered and went dark, and I was left in near total shadow. My skin went clammy. I fumbled with the switch until the bulb buzzed back on. For just a moment, in the black glass of the window, I saw something that should not have been there. It was me, but not, standing just a little too close to the bed, its mouth twisted into that faint curve of a smile, the one that never reached the eyes. I did not sleep. By morning, I felt half hollow, running on stale coffee and adrenaline. Every time I glanced into a surface, even the sheen of the toaster or the faint reflection on the television screen, I thought I caught it. A delayed movement, a darker eye, the flicker of a smile. I knew I had to do something. I could not live like this. I gathered the courage to go back into the attic that afternoon. The sunlight should have made it easier, but it only revealed how wrong the room had become. The mirror stood uncovered, leaning slightly against the wall like it had been shifted closer to the center of the attic. The sheet lay even farther away, shoved into a corner. I approached slowly, gloves back on, heart pounding in my ears. I told myself I would drag it downstairs and smash it in the driveway, break it into 100 pieces, end this once and for all. But as I stepped in front of it, I froze. The reflection was not matching me anymore, not even pretending. It stood upright with its hands folded neatly in front of it while I hunched over like a nervous wreck. Its face was calm, composed, almost serene. And then, as I stared, it tilted its head in that slow, curious way. I tilted mine too, testing. The reflection did not move. For the first time, I felt the sharp clarity of being observed, not just mirrored, watched. I lunged forward, yanking the sheet up from the floor and trying to fling it over the glass. But before the fabric landed, the reflection leaned closer, pressing its palm to the inside of the mirror. My breath fogged against the glass as the sheet slid over and cut off the view. I stumbled back, the sheet shuddering slightly, as if something had pressed against it from the inside. Then, stillness. Only my ragged breathing filled the attic. I wanted to run, but my legs refused. My body felt rooted. I forced myself down the stairs, each step echoing like a gunshot, and slammed the attic door behind me. That night, I did not go near the bathroom mirror or the dark window panes. I sat in the living room with every light on, and tried to convince myself I was safe. But at 2:43 in the morning, I heard it, a sound I had never heard before. Glass tapping, light, deliberate, rhythmic. It came from above, from the attic. I held my breath. It continued, tap, 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 like fingernails against glass. Then it stopped, and I heard something worse. A laugh, not loud, just a soft, rasping chuckle that sounded like it came from a throat too dry to manage sound. My stomach turned to ice. I did not go upstairs. I sat frozen until the first faint light of dawn crept through the curtains. Only then did the air in the house seem to loosen. Only then did I move. By morning I thought I might have hallucinated it. Lack of sleep, too much stress. But when I forced myself upstairs, I found proof I could not deny. The sheet was gone. The mirror stood uncovered again, and etched into the glass were 3 faint scratches, just at eye level, as if something inside had dragged its nails down the surface. I stood staring for a long time, my chest rising and falling like I had run a mile. And as I stared, I realized the scratches were not random. They looked like letters, rough, jagged, but deliberate. They spelled out one word, mine. The scratches stayed with me all day. I could not concentrate on anything else. It felt like the word had been carved directly into my mind, etched across every thought, pressing itself into me the way it was pressed into that glass. Mine. Not a warning. A claim. I told myself I should just get rid of it. Drive to the dump, smash the mirror into pieces, and bury the shards where no one would ever find them. I even went so far as to gather supplies, gloves, a hammer, a blanket to wrap the glass in. But when I carried the hammer up the stairs, something strange happened. The closer I got to the attic door, the heavier it felt in my hand. By the time I was standing at the top step, my arm ached with the weight. It made no sense. It was an ordinary hammer, yet I could barely keep my grip. I dropped it and it clanged against the wood. The sound was too loud, like the attic itself wanted to echo it, to remind me how small I was inside this house. I picked it up again and forced myself inside. The mirror stood waiting, uncovered as always, leaning there with the faint scratches catching the dim afternoon light. The word gleamed back at me in jagged lines. Mine. I lifted the hammer. My reflection stared, and then it smiled. Not a wide grin, not cartoonish or exaggerated, just that slight upward curve at the corner of the mouth. It was enough to make my insides twist. I froze with the hammer halfway raised. My reflection should have been shaking the way I was, hands trembling from adrenaline, but it looked calm, steady, almost patient. I tried to bring the hammer down, but my arm would not move. My whole body felt locked, as though the reflection had reached through the glass and gripped me by the bones. The harder I tried to swing, the more impossible it became. Finally, I dropped the hammer, breathing hard, sweat dripping down my neck. The mirror looked almost smug. I backed out of the attic and slammed the door again. My chest heaved, heart pounding against my ribs, but I felt no relief. I knew now that smashing it would not be simple. It would not let me. That night, I avoided every reflective surface. I kept my eyes on the floor as I brushed my teeth, used my phone screen turned away from me, covered the television with a blanket. It did not help. The mirror did not need glass anymore. Sometime around midnight, I heard footsteps. Not in the attic this time. In the hallway. Slow, measured, deliberate. The floorboards creaked with each step, and then fell silent outside my bedroom door. I stared at the door until my eyes watered. The knob did not move. The door did not rattle, but I could feel it. Something was standing there on the other side, waiting. At some point, exhaustion dragged me under despite the terror, but the dreams were worse. I dreamed of the mirror, endless and towering, its surface rippling like black water, hands pressed against it from the inside, hundreds of them, palms smearing across the glass. Then one face pushed forward among them. My face, but wrong. The eyes too dark, the smile too steady. It whispered the word again. Mine. I woke gasping, drenched in sweat. The house was silent except for the faint ticking of the hallway clock. But when I glanced at the closet door, I saw it was open an inch wider than it had been when I went to bed. The next morning, I found more scratches. This time, not on the mirror. They were on the attic door itself. 4 vertical grooves down the wood, deep and splintered, as though something had tried to claw its way through. I knew then that it was not trapped anymore. The glass was not a prison. It had been a doorway, and I had opened it the moment I uncovered it. I left the house for most of the day, wandering coffee shops, sitting in the library, even driving aimlessly just to avoid being inside those walls. But everywhere I went, I caught glimpses. In the reflection of a shop window, in the glossy hood of a parked car, in the shimmer of water in a fountain. Always the same figure. Me, but not me. Waiting. When I returned home that evening, the house felt heavier than ever. The air pressed down, stale and damp, carrying a faint metallic tang that made me think of blood. The attic door stood closed, but I could hear faint scratching again from above, like fingernails dragging against glass. I did not go upstairs. I stayed in the living room, every light blazing, the television on for noise, though I barely paid attention to it. I could not shake the feeling that the house itself was shrinking around me, closing in. Around midnight, the television screen flickered. For an instant, I saw it. Not the program I had been half watching, but a reflection. My living room, as if seen from inside the mirror. And standing behind me in that reflection was my double, its head tilted, smiling faintly. I spun around. Nothing was there. When I looked back at the screen, the normal program had returned, but my stomach had already turned to stone. It had stepped out. Sleep was impossible. I sat awake until the gray light of dawn filtered through the curtains, clutching the remote like it could protect me. My whole body ached with tension. By morning, I decided I could not stay here anymore. I packed a small bag, stuffing and clothes, toiletries, whatever I could grab. I would get a motel, at least for a few nights, clear my head, figure out what to do. But when I went to grab my car keys from the hook by the door, they were gone. The hook was empty. I searched everywhere, kitchen counters, jacket pockets, the floor, nothing. Finally, I looked up. They were hanging from the attic door handle. I stood frozen, heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Slowly, I stepped closer. The keys dangled neatly from the knob, swaying slightly though there was no draft. Above them, faint smears streaked the wood, fingerprints, too large to be mine. I could not bring myself to touch the handle. I backed away, every hair on my body standing on end. That night, I stayed in the living room again. I barely moved. The scratching from the attic grew louder, more insistent, until it sounded like something pounding its fists against the glass. And then, in a moment of silence so deep I could hear the blood in my ears, I heard the floorboards above me groan. It was not inside the mirror anymore. It was moving across the attic floor. I sat rigid, gripping the edge of the couch, staring at the ceiling. Every creak came closer to the spot directly above me, and then it stopped. The house was silent, too silent. And then, very softly, I heard it. A whisper, my own voice, coming from the ceiling, but stretched and dry and wrong. It said the same word, mine. The attic ceiling groaned above me for what felt like hours, but time had lost its shape. I sat on the couch, rigid and breathless, staring upward at the boards that separated me from whatever waited on the other side. The whisper still echoed in my head, not fading like an ordinary sound, but sinking deeper, embedding itself until I could not tell if I was remembering it or if it was still happening. I wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at me to throw the door open, sprint into the street, and never look back. But my legs would not move. My body felt like it belonged to someone else now, like I was just a passenger watching from behind my own eyes. The thought hit me hard. What if that was exactly what it wanted? Sometime after dawn, I must have passed out from sheer exhaustion. When I opened my eyes, light leaked through the curtains, but the house did not feel safe. It was worse. The air was thick, heavy, like it had absorbed everything I had felt the night before and was now feeding it back to me. My mouth was dry, my throat raw, but I did not move. I could not bring myself to go upstairs. When I finally stood, I walked through the house with deliberate steps, careful not to glance at any reflective surface. Even the toaster seemed threatening. I grabbed my phone, ready to call someone, anyone, but the screen froze before I could dial. The wallpaper image was supposed to be a photo of a mountain view I had taken years ago. Now it was my own face staring back at me, not the face I knew, but the other one, the one in the mirror. The smile was faint, but unmistakable. I dropped the phone and it clattered across the floor. I told myself again that I had to leave. Motel, hotel, it did not matter. I only needed distance. The car keys still hung from the attic door handle, mocking me, daring me. I refused to touch them. Instead, I called a cab from the landline phone, forcing myself to keep my voice calm as I gave the address. The operator said a driver would be here in 20 minutes. Those 20 minutes stretched into eternity. I sat by the front window, eyes locked on the driveway, waiting for headlights or any sign of life. But the street remained empty. At exactly the 20-minute mark, the phone rang again. My stomach lurched when I saw it was the same number. I answered, my voice barely working. The operator's tone was neutral, professional. She said the driver had arrived, but no one was outside. She asked if I was sure I wanted to cancel. I stammered that I never saw a car. She paused for too long, then said quietly, almost too quietly to hear, that the driver swore he saw me standing in the driveway. I hung up without replying. The day passed in fragments. I locked myself in the living room, curtains drawn, lights on, television playing to fill the silence. Every so often, I thought I saw something move in the corner of my eye, a shift in the reflection of the screen, or a shimmer across the glass of a picture frame. I stopped looking altogether. By nightfall, I was trembling with fatigue and hunger, but could not bring myself to eat. My stomach clenched every time I tried. Around midnight, the house seemed to exhale, a long sigh through the pipes and the walls, and the lights flickered. When they steadied again, I saw the attic door was open, only an inch, but open. The keys no longer hung from the knob. They lay on the floor at the bottom of the stairs. I froze, not daring to move. The silence pressed down, thick and unnatural, until it was broken by the sound of something dragging across the attic floor. Slow, deliberate. It grew closer until I could pinpoint it directly above the living room. Then it stopped. I wanted to believe it was all in my head. Sleep deprivation, paranoia, stress. But then a single object dropped from the attic, landing with a soft clink on the floor. It was a shard of glass. The mirror was breaking, not from my side, but from inside. I backed toward the front door, heart hammering so hard it hurt. My hand shook as I fumbled with the lock, but the door would not budge. No matter how I twisted or pulled, it stayed closed. The windows were the same, stuck fast as though the house itself had decided I was not leaving. Another shard fell, this one larger, glinting in the faint light. I forced myself to look up, and in that split second, I saw a face staring through the crack in the attic door. My face, but wrong. The eyes too dark, the smile too wide, skin pale as wax. I stumbled backward, tripping over the rug, hitting the floor hard. The pain barely registered. The attic door creaked open farther, and the sound of glass shattering filled the house like a storm. I crawled toward the kitchen, my only thought to arm myself, to grab a knife, anything. The air grew colder with every inch I moved, and the faint whisper followed me, repeating that same word over and over. Mine, mine, mine. I grabbed the largest knife I could find and pressed myself against the counter, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The house was alive with noise now, footsteps pounding above, glass raining down in bursts, the groan of wood under impossible weight. and then silence. I tightened my grip on the knife, straining to hear. Every muscle in my body screamed to move, but fear rooted me in place. From the living room came the faint sound of footsteps, not from above anymore, from the floor. Each step slow, deliberate, dragging, coming closer. The shadows stretched too far, bending toward the kitchen, as if eager to greet what walked with them. I forced myself to peek around the doorway, and my heart nearly stopped. It was me, standing there, knife in hand, expression twisted into that same steady smile. The reflection had stepped out. I blinked and it was gone. Just the empty living room, the shards of glass glittering across the carpet. But the knife was still heavy in my hand, and when I looked down, I realized the blade was smeared with something dark. I did not remember using it. The attic groaned again, louder than before. The house seemed to lean inward, pulling me toward it. My double had not just stepped out. It had stepped in, and the barrier between us was gone. I stumbled back, clutching the knife, unable to stop trembling. The mirror was no longer in the attic. It was everywhere now, in every surface that could catch a reflection, in every corner I dared not look at. I had opened the doorway, and there was no closing it. That night, I did not sleep. I could not. I sat in the kitchen until the sun rose, and even then, the light brought no relief. The shards glittered on the floor like teeth, and every one of them held a reflection that did not match mine. The first rays of morning spilled across the house, thin and weak through the dusty curtains. The air felt stale, as though it had been locked in place for centuries, waiting for me to breathe it in. I had not slept. I had not dared to. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the broken shards glittering on the floor, each one holding a face that was not mine. I had survived the night, but survival felt hollow. Something had already crossed the threshold. The knife still sat on the kitchen table where I had left it. I could not bring myself to touch it again. The smear of darkness on its blade had dried into a crusted stain, and the sight of it twisted my stomach. I could not remember how it got there. That was the worst part. I could not trust my own memory anymore. The attic was silent now, but that silence felt heavier than the noises had, a waiting silence. I could feel the weight of the house pressing inward, the way a person holds their breath before speaking. Every creak of the floor beneath my feet sounded deliberate, as though it belonged to someone else. I told myself it was over, that breaking the mirror had somehow freed me, but I knew better. The mirror had not been a cage, it had been a door, and now that it was shattered, there was no barrier at all. I forced myself to act. Fear had kept me frozen too long, and if I stayed in this house another night, I would not come out alive. I gathered what little strength I had left and began to clean the shards. I wore gloves, careful not to look directly into any piece, dropping them into a heavy garbage bag one by one. Each shard gave off a faint chill, as though it still held a breath of something that did not belong in this world. When the bag was full, I tied it tightly and carried it outside. The weight felt unnatural for so little glass. My arms ached under it, and the plastic bulged as though something inside was pressing outward. I did not stop to think. I loaded it into the trunk of my car and drove. I did not know where I was going, only that I needed distance between me and that house. The road wound through endless stretches of pine and desert brush, the sky widening overhead, but the farther I drove, the heavier the trunk seemed to feel. A low thud rattled through the car as though the bag had shifted on its own. My breath quickened, but I did not stop. After an hour of driving, I reached a quarry on the edge of town, a place where the earth gaped open like a wound. It was deserted, silent but for the wind echoing across stone. I parked near the edge and wrestled the bag out of the trunk. It squirmed in my hands, or maybe I imagined it, but the movement made bile rise in my throat. Without giving myself time to reconsider, I heaved the bag into the abyss. It fell for a long moment, then shattered against the rocks below, the sound sharp and final. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of relief. The pieces were gone. The door was gone. I could leave this nightmare behind. I drove home in silence, the empty trunk a strange comfort. The house loomed in the distance, but its shadow did not terrify me the way it had before. It looked smaller now, weaker, like a place that had lost its teeth. When I stepped inside, the air felt lighter, though the silence still clung to the walls. I told myself it was just a house again. That night, I slept for the first time. The dreams came, restless and cold, but they were only dreams. When I woke, sunlight filled the room, and nothing moved in the shadows. For 3 days I dared to hope. I went about my life, cautious but freer. I even laughed once, though the sound felt strange, leaving my throat. On the 4th day, I received a package. No return address, no postmark, just a small box sitting on my doorstep. My hands shook as I carried it inside. I wanted to throw it away, to burn it unopened, but some part of me already knew. Inside was a single shard of glass, smooth, gleaming, impossibly cold to the touch, and in its surface I saw not my own reflection but hers, the other me, the one with the pale skin and the black eyes and the smile that stretched too wide. She lifted her hand and pressed it against the glass, and before I realized what I was doing, I pressed mine against it too. The glass was not just cold, it was soft, pliable, as though it wanted me to step through, and for the first time since it began, I understood. I had not brought something out of the mirror. It had been calling me in all along. I dropped the shard, heart hammering, but the image did not vanish. The reflection remained, standing there, smiling, waiting. Her lips moved soundlessly, forming words I already knew. Let me out. I took the shard and wrapped it in cloth, hiding it deep in the farthest corner of the attic. I nailed the hatch shut, sealed it as best I could. The house is quiet now, but I know the truth. The mirror was never just glass. It was a contract, and I signed it the moment I uncovered it. The ending is not triumph, it is understanding. I will carry this reflection with me until the day it decides to cross again. The difference is that now I know what it wants, and knowing is a kind of power. For now, the attic is sealed, and the house is silent. The reflection waits, but it does not have me yet. I walk through the rooms in daylight, breathing easier, reminding myself that sometimes the only way to win is to keep living, to keep denying the pull. The other me can wait forever if it has to. Because this is my life, my body, my face. And no matter how many smiles it carves into the glass, it will never be mine. When my son first started talking about his new friend Mick, I thought it was cute. He had just turned 4, and I figured it was normal for kids his age to invent imaginary playmates. It started with small things, like him setting out an extra chair at the table or talking to an empty corner of the room. Nothing unusual, really, just a phase, I told myself. The first time I heard the name, I was folding laundry in his room. He was playing on the carpet, mumbling under his breath. I asked who he was talking to, and he said, as if it was the most normal thing in the world, Mick. I laughed and asked what Mick looked like. He just shrugged and said, "He has no face." I did not think much of it at the time. Kids have strange imaginations. They see shapes in the shadows, hear voices in the wind. I figured he had just picked the name out of nowhere. But then he started repeating things Mick said, little phrases that stuck in my mind because they felt too precise, too adult. One night, as I was putting him to bed, he looked up at me with those big blue eyes and said, "Mick wants you to come back outside." The way he said it made my skin crawl, calm, matter of fact, like it was just a normal bedtime request. "Why does Mick want me to come outside?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He just shrugged and rolled over, pulling the blanket up to his chin. I did not sleep well that night. I kept turning the phrase over in my mind, "Come back outside." It echoed in the quiet, familiar and wrong at the same time. When I was in college, I had a stalker, a man I barely knew, who followed me home from class one evening and would not leave me alone after that. He would stand outside my apartment building at night, calling up to my window. He said the same thing over and over, like a twisted mantra. "I will wait outside until you are alone." He said it so many times that I started to hear it in my sleep. I never told anyone exactly what he said back then. I moved cities, changed my phone number, even my last name after I got married. I thought I had left it all behind. But now, decades later, my son was saying those same words. I tried to brush it off. Maybe I was just reading too much into it. Kids pick up on stray phrases from TV, from other kids at the park. But the more I listened, the more uneasy I felt. One morning, over breakfast, I asked my son, "What does Mick like to do?" He looked up from his cereal and said, "He likes to stand by the door. He says he is waiting." My hands froze around the mug of coffee. Waiting for what? He tilted his head like he was listening to someone I could not see. Then he said, "Waiting for you to come back outside." That was the moment I stopped pretending this was all just in my head. I started paying more attention to the things my son was saying. Every time he mentioned Mick, I wrote it down. The phrases were always similar. "Mick wants you to come outside. Mick says he will wait for you. Mick says he knows you remember." One afternoon, I found him standing at the front door staring through the glass. When I asked what he was doing, he said, "Mick said he is on the porch." I flung the door open, heart racing. There was no one there, just the empty yard, the quiet street. My son did not look surprised. He just said, "He is there, Mommy. You cannot see him, but he sees you." That night, I dreamed about the man from college. I woke up sweating, my breath catching in my throat. I had not thought about him in years, not really, but now the memories came flooding back. The way he would stand in the shadows, the way he would whisper my name like it belonged to him. I started locking the doors more carefully. I checked the windows twice before going to bed. My husband noticed, but did not press me about it. I told him I was just being cautious. He did not know about the man from college. I had never told him. One evening, my son was playing in the living room while I cooked dinner. I heard him talking quietly, like he was having a conversation. I peeked around the corner and saw him sitting cross-legged, facing the window. "What are you talking about, honey?" I asked. He did not turn around. "Mick says he likes your hair down. He says you looked pretty that night." I felt my stomach twist. My hair. I used to wear it long in college, always down. That was the way he liked it. He said it once when he cornered me in the library, his eyes fixed on my hair like it was something he owned. My son could not possibly know that. No one did. I sat down on the couch, trying to keep my voice calm. "What night, sweetheart?" He turned to me then, his expression blank. "Mick says, you know." I did not have an answer. I just sat there, listening to the quiet tick of the clock on the wall. The air felt too heavy, like the walls were pressing in. That night, after my son was asleep, I stood at the front window. looking out at the darkness. I could not see anything unusual, but I could not shake the feeling that someone was out there, standing just beyond the glow of the porch light. I did not know what to do. Part of me wanted to believe it was just my past creeping back in, memories tangled up with the way kids say the strangest things. But another part of me, smaller, quieter, wondered if it was more than that. Was it possible for the past to find its way back like this, through a child's innocent words, or was it something else entirely, something I could not name? Either way, I knew one thing for sure. Mick was not just an imaginary friend. The next morning, I woke up feeling like my skin did not fit right. Everything felt off, like the world had shifted just a little while I slept. My son was already up, sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, talking to someone I could not see. His voice was low and calm, like he was telling a secret to a friend. I stood in the doorway and watched him for a moment, trying to decide what to say. Finally, I asked as casually as I could, "What are you and Mick talking about today, sweetheart?" He turned to look at me, his expression serious in a way that made my stomach tighten. "Mick says he likes the way you always look out the window at night." I felt my breath catch. I had never told my son about that. About how sometimes when I could not sleep, I would stand at the window and stare into the dark, hoping to see nothing and afraid of what I might see. I forced a smile. "Did Mick say anything else?" "He says he is cold," my son said simply. "He says he wants to come inside." I swallowed hard and walked into the kitchen. I needed coffee, something warm and real to hold on to. As I poured my cup, I tried to remind myself that kids say strange things. They pick up bits of conversation, things they hear on the television or in passing, but that phrase, the way he had said it, felt like something else. I spent the rest of the morning trying to keep busy, cleaning and folding laundry, but every time I passed by the living room, I caught my son still talking to that empty space. I could almost imagine Mick standing there, patient and silent, waiting for me to pay attention. By lunchtime, I felt raw and frayed. I sat my son down at the table and asked him gently, "Honey, can you tell me more about Mick? What does he look like?" He blinked at me, thoughtful. He has no face, but he smiles when you are not looking. A shiver ran up my spine. "What do you mean when I am not looking?" My son shrugged. "He says you know." I did not know how to respond to that, so I just sat there, holding his small hand in mine, and tried not to show how shaken I was. That afternoon, I found myself thinking back to college, to those months when I lived in fear of the man who would not go away. I had almost convinced myself it had not been as bad as I remembered, that maybe I had overreacted, but now, hearing those same words again, I felt all of it rush back like it was yesterday. I decided to call my best friend from college, someone who had been there when it all happened. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm and familiar. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "Do you remember, back then, with him?" She was quiet for a moment. "Of course I do. Why are you bringing it up now?" I hesitated, then told her everything. About Mick, about what my son had been saying. Her silence on the other end felt heavy. "That is really strange," she said finally, "but it is probably just a coincidence. Kids have vivid imaginations." "Yeah," I said, though I did not believe it. "Probably." After I hung up, I sat on the couch and tried to collect my thoughts. I kept coming back to the same feeling, that this was not just some random childhood game, that somehow, in some way I could not explain, the past was leaking back into my life. That evening, as I was getting my son ready for bed, I noticed he had a small scratch on his arm. It was fresh, a thin red line that had not been there that morning. "Honey, how did you get this?" I asked, touching it gently. He looked at it, then at me. "Mick did it. He wanted me to know he is real." I felt a surge of anger and fear all at once. I wanted to scream, to demand answers from something I could not see. Instead, I hugged my son tightly and whispered, "No one is allowed to hurt you, okay? Not even Mick." He just nodded, his small body warm and solid in my arms. That night, I locked every door and window twice. I slept with the light on, the soft yellow glow doing nothing to chase away the shadows in my mind. Every sound made me jump. Every creak of the house felt like a footstep. Around 2 in the morning, I woke up and felt sure someone was standing in the hallway. I held my breath, straining to listen, but there was nothing. Just the soft hum of the refrigerator, the distant whir of the heat kicking on. I lay there for hours, staring at the ceiling, waiting for morning. When the sun finally rose, I felt no relief, just exhaustion. I decided to do something I had been avoiding for years. I went into the attic. It was dusty and cold, the air stale and heavy. Old boxes, forgotten furniture, the smell of mothballs and wood rot. I stood there, my flashlight sweeping the corners. Nothing but shadows and memories. But as I turned to go, I noticed something that stopped me cold. In the dust on the floor, there were footprints, small like a child's, and bigger ones beside them. I could not tell how fresh they were, but they were there. I climbed back down, my hands shaking. My son was in the kitchen, eating cereal, his eyes bright and innocent. "Did you go up there?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He shook his head. "No, Mommy, Mick doesn't like the attic." I felt a chill in the center of my chest. I did not know what to think anymore. I wanted to believe it was all in my head, that this was just a phase, a child's imagination mixed up with old fears. But every time I looked at my son, I saw something in his eyes that made me wonder. Maybe it was not just imagination. Maybe Mick was real. I woke up early the next morning with a sense of dread pressing down on my chest like a heavy blanket. It had been there for days now, an ache I could not shake, no matter how many times I tried to tell myself it was all in my head. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt like it was holding its breath, and I almost wanted to leave it all behind for the day. Just go for a drive, take my son to the park, pretend everything was normal, but I knew I could not keep pretending, not anymore. I found my son sitting at the kitchen table, his small hands cupped around a mug of warm milk. He looked up at me with that wide-eyed innocence that only made everything worse. "Mick says he likes the smell of the house," he said in a sing-song voice, like he was sharing something funny. I forced a smile and sat down across from him. "What else did Mick say?" I asked, my voice softer than I intended. He thought for a moment, his little forehead scrunched up in concentration. "He says he misses how quiet it was before we came. He liked it better that way." The words sent a shiver down my spine. I tried to brush it off, to remind myself that kids pick up on things adults forget they have said out loud. But that phrase, "he liked it better," that way sounded too much like something an adult would say, something an adult would feel. I decided to keep my son home from preschool that day. I told myself it was because I wanted to keep him close, but the truth was, I did not trust what he might say to his teachers if they asked about Mick. I did not want them to look at me with pity or suspicion, like I was the one who needed help. We spent the morning baking cookies, the warm, sweet smell filling the house. It felt good, grounding. But every time I looked at my son, I could see that flicker of something else in his eyes. Something older than a child should ever be. After lunch, I sat him down with a coloring book and went upstairs to the attic. I could not explain why, but I felt drawn to it, like if I could just see it again in the light of day, it might make more sense. The attic was as musty and still as before. I ran my fingers along the old wooden beams, feeling the splinters catch at my skin. I checked every corner, every shadow, but there was nothing there. No sign of life, no sign of Mick, but the footprints I had seen yesterday were gone, wiped clean like they had never existed at all. I stood there for a long time, listening to the quiet. I wanted to believe it was just my mind playing tricks on me, old memories resurfacing in the voice of my son's imaginary friend. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. I could feel it in the walls, in the way the house seemed to shift around me. I climbed back down, my hands shaking. My son was still at the table, humming to himself as he colored. "Did you find him?" he asked without looking up. I forced a laugh. "Who, honey?" He glanced at me then, his eyes too calm. "Mick. He says he likes it when you look for him." I did not know what to say to that. I just sat down beside him and watched him fill in the lines with bright, happy colors that felt completely out of place. That night I could not sleep. I lay awake listening to every creak and sigh of the old house. Around 3 in the morning, I heard it again, a soft, deliberate tapping sound, like fingers drumming lightly against the wall. I got up and followed the sound to the hallway. It was coming from the attic hatch. I stood there, my heart thudding so loud I was sure it would wake the whole neighborhood. I wanted to run back to bed, to pull the covers over my head and pretend it was just the wind. But I forced myself to stand there and listen. The tapping stopped, and for a moment there was nothing but the sound of my own breathing. Then, so soft I almost thought I imagined it, a voice, my son's voice. "Mommy, Mick says it is time to come back outside." I stumbled back into my room, my hands pressed over my mouth to keep from screaming. My son was asleep in his bed, his face peaceful and soft in the glow of the nightlight. But I knew what I had heard. I knew it was not a dream. The next morning I called my old therapist. I had not spoken to her in years, not since college, but I needed to hear a calm voice, someone who would not think I was losing my mind. She listened patiently as I told her everything. About Mick, about the words my son had been repeating, about how it all sounded like the things the man from college used to say. "It is possible," she said gently, "that your son is picking up on your anxiety. Children are sensitive to the fears of the adults around them." "I know," I said, my voice shaking. "But what if it is more than that? What if he is, I do not know, channeling something, someone?" There was a pause. "It is not impossible," she said, But it is also possible that you are remembering things in a new light because of your son's words. Trauma has a way of echoing forward. I hung up feeling no more settled than before. The idea that it was all in my head was almost worse than the idea that it was real. That evening, I found my son standing at the window staring out into the dark. His breath fogged up the glass, and for a moment he looked so small and vulnerable that it made my heart ache. "Honey, what are you looking at?" I asked. He turned to me slowly. "Mick says he is right outside. He says you will see him soon." I felt the blood drain from my face. I pulled him away from the window and held him close, trying to keep my hands from shaking. But all I could think was that I had spent years trying to bury the past, to keep it locked away where it could not hurt me. And now it was back, wearing the voice of my son's imaginary friend. That night, I did not sleep at all. I sat in the living room with every light on, the house quiet around me. My husband had fallen asleep on the couch earlier in the evening, tired from work and the weight of everything we had been carrying these past few weeks. I did not wake him. I could not bear to pull him into this heaviness when he was finally getting some rest. My son was asleep in his bed, his small body curled up under his blankets. I checked on him every hour, just to be sure. Each time I found him safe and still breathing, I felt a moment of relief that was quickly replaced by a deeper fear. I did not know how to protect him from something I could not see, something I could not even be sure was real. I made a pot of coffee and sat at the table, staring at the dark window. My reflection looked back at me, pale and drawn. I thought about all the times in college I had sat just like this, too afraid to sleep, too afraid to trust the silence. Back then, I would tell myself it was all in my head, that I was just being paranoid. But now, the words my son was repeating were like echoes of those nights, and I could not pretend anymore. Around 3 a.m, I heard a noise. It was soft, a whisper of movement from upstairs. I held my breath, listening. It came again, the creak of a floorboard, then the sound of something brushing lightly against the wall. I stood up, the chair scraping against the floor, and for a moment I thought about waking my husband. But I did not. I needed to see it for myself. I moved slowly, each step careful and quiet. The sound was coming from the attic. I stood at the bottom of the pull-down ladder, my hand hovering over the rope. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might crack my ribs. I took a deep breath and pulled the ladder down. It unfolded with a groan that seemed to echo through the house. I climbed up, one rung at a time, until my head was level with the attic floor. I swept the beam of my flashlight around the space, half hoping to see nothing at all. The attic was empty, the air cold and stale, but in the corner, where the dust was thickest, I saw something that made my skin prickle. There were 2 sets of footprints in the dust, one small like a child's and one larger, the size of a grown man's. They led from the attic window to the far wall and back again, over and over, as if someone had been pacing there for a long time. I swallowed hard and climbed the rest of the way up. I walked carefully, the floorboards creaking under my feet. The footprints were fresh. I could see where the dust had been disturbed, the clear outline of bare feet. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely keep the flashlight steady. I whispered, "Mick, are you here?" My voice sounded small and hollow in the dark. There was no answer, just the silence pressing in around me. I backed away and climbed down the ladder, closing the hatch as quietly as I could. My legs felt weak, and I had to grip the banister to steady myself as I made my way back to the kitchen. My husband stirred as I sat down again, blinking sleepily. "You okay?" he asked, his voice rough with sleep. I forced a smile. "Yeah, just couldn't sleep." He reached over and squeezed my hand. "We'll figure this out. Maybe we should have someone come and bless the house again." I nodded, though I did not know if that would help. Part of me wondered if this was not something that could be cleansed away, if it was tied to me, to the past I had tried so hard to leave behind. The next morning my son seemed quiet. He ate his breakfast in silence, his eyes downcast. I tried to act normal, to keep things calm, but inside I was a mess of questions and fear. After breakfast, I took him to the park. I thought the fresh air and the sight of other children might help. He played quietly, building a small tower of stones by the edge of the sandbox. I watched him, every movement, every glance over his shoulder. When we got home, I found a drawing on his bedroom floor. It was of our house as usual, but this time there was no attic window. Instead, the figure was standing by the front door, his hand raised in a wave. Beneath it, in my son's careful handwriting, were the words, "He is almost here." I felt a wave of nausea and had to sit down. My son came over and laid his small hand on my knee. "It's okay, Mommy," he said softly. "Mick says he just wants to say hello." I wanted to tell him not to talk to Mick anymore, not to listen to him, but the words stuck in my throat. I did not want to scare him. I did not want to make him feel like he was responsible for the fear that was choking our house. That night, I did not sleep at all. I sat in the living room again, the lights on, the coffee growing cold beside me. Around midnight, I heard the front door creak softly. I froze, listening. It was not the wind. It was the slow, careful turn of a doorknob. I stood up and walked to the hallway, my heart thudding so hard I could barely hear anything else. The door was still locked, but the handle was turned slightly, as if someone had tried it. I pressed my hand to the cool metal, feeling the faint echo of warmth. Someone had been there. I went back to the kitchen and waited. I did not know what I was waiting for, but I knew I would not sleep again until I had an answer. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I had not rested at all. My head was heavy, my eyes sore. My husband had left early for work, the house already quiet and still when I got out of bed. I walked through the rooms like I was trying to catch something in the corner of my vision, something that was always just a step ahead of me. My son was sitting at the kitchen table, coloring in his sketchbook. He looked up and gave me a small smile, like he could sense that I needed it. "Good morning, Mommy," he said in that gentle voice of his. "Good morning, honey," I said, my voice soft and careful. "What are you drawing today?" He held up the paper. It was another picture of our house, but this time the figure was inside, standing in the living room. The words beneath it read, "He is here." I tried to keep my face calm, but my hands were shaking as I took the paper from him. "What does Mick say now?" I asked, almost afraid of the answer. "He says you are ready," my son said simply. "He says he has been waiting a long time." I felt the air leave my lungs like I had been punched. I sat down at the table and looked at my son, really looked at him. His small face, the soft curve of his cheek, the way his hair fell into his eyes. He was just a child, but his words carried an echo of something older, something I could not name. I decided I needed to know more. I needed to understand what was happening, even if I did not want to believe it. That afternoon, while my son was napping, I went into the attic again. The air was cold and still, the dust dancing in the beam of my flashlight. I walked slowly, my fingers trailing along the old wooden beams. I was looking for something, though I did not know what. A sign, a message, anything that might explain why this was happening now, after all these years. In the far corner, I found a small wooden box I had never noticed before. It was old and worn, the hinges rusted. My hands were trembling as I lifted the lid. Inside was a bundle of letters, tied with a piece of fraying twine. The paper was yellowed with age, the handwriting elegant and precise. I picked up the top letter and unfolded it carefully. The words were not mine, but they were familiar. I will wait outside until you are alone. I felt my breath catch in my throat, the same words the man from college had whispered to me all those years ago, the same words my son had been saying in the voice of his imaginary friend. I read through the letters one by one. They were all addressed to someone named Margaret. Each one spoke of waiting, of watching, of knowing her better than anyone else. The words were obsessive, twisted in a way that made my skin crawl. I sat there for a long time. The letters spread out around me like a map of the past. The man who had written them was gone. He had to be. But the words had survived. And somehow they had found their way into my son's mouth. I put the letters back in the box and carried it down to the living room. My son was awake now, sitting quietly with his crayons. He looked up as I came in. "Honey," I said gently, "where did Mick come from?" He thought for a moment, his little brow furrowing. "He says he has always been here, before me, before you." The way he said it, so calm and certain, sent a chill down my spine. That night, after I put my son to bed, I sat down with the box of letters and read them again. I wanted to understand. I needed to understand. The man who had written them had been consumed by his obsession. He had made his own little world out of those words, a place where he could keep her forever. And now, it felt like that world was trying to pull me in. I did not sleep. I sat in the dark, listening to the house breathe around me. At some point in the night I heard footsteps in the hallway, slow, deliberate. I held my breath, waiting. The steps stopped outside my door. I got up and opened the door, but the hallway was empty. My son's room was dark and still, the soft glow of his nightlight spilling into the hall. I walked in and watched him sleep, his small hands curled under his chin. I whispered, "Mick, if you are real, leave my son alone. Leave us alone." There was no answer, just the quiet hum of the house. The next morning I called Father Andrew again. I told him everything, every detail. He listened without interrupting, his voice calm and steady. When I finished, he said, "I think it is time we blessed the house again, and this time we will focus on breaking any attachments that might be feeding this." He arrived later that afternoon, his face serious as he walked through the rooms. My son watched from the couch, his eyes wide and solemn. Father Andrew sprinkled holy water, recited prayers, and paused at every window and doorway. When he reached the attic, he looked at me and said, "This is where it started, isn't it?" I nodded, My hands were cold, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. He climbed the ladder slowly, his words soft but firm. I stood at the bottom, listening to the murmured prayers and the creak of the old wood. The air seemed to shift, the temperature dropping like a winter wind had found its way inside. When he came back down, he looked tired but relieved. "It is done," he said, "but you must stay strong. Do not let fear give it power." I nodded, though I did not know if I could promise that. The fear was a part of me now, woven into every breath I took. That night the house was quiet. My son slept peacefully, no more whispers in the dark. I sat by the window and watched the street, the glow of the lampposts, soft and reassuring. But even in the silence I could feel it, a weight in the air, like a breath held just behind me. The days after Father Andrew blessed the house felt different, lighter, like someone had opened the windows and let fresh air in after a long winter. I tried to focus on that feeling, to hold on to the idea that maybe this was really over. My son seemed happier too. He laughed more, played without those long pauses that had started to make me wonder if he was listening to something I could not hear. For a few days, I allowed myself to believe that the blessing had worked. I cleaned the attic, wiped away the last of the dust, and put the old box of letters back where I found them. Part of me wanted to burn them, to watch the words that had haunted me for so long turn to ash, but I could not. It felt wrong to erase them, even if they scared me, like they were a piece of the story I needed to remember. One evening, my son came to me as I was washing dishes. He tugged at the edge of my sweater and said, "Mommy, Mick is gone now." I dried my hands and knelt down in front of him. "Are you sure, sweetheart?" He nodded, his eyes clear and calm in a way I had not seen for weeks. He said goodbye. He said you are safe. Those words should have been a relief. They should have lifted the weight I had been carrying. But instead, they left me feeling hollow, like something important had ended, and I did not know what to do with the space it left behind. That night, I tucked my son into bed and stayed with him until he fell asleep. His breathing was soft and even, and I watched the gentle rise and fall of his chest. When I finally stood to leave, he stirred and mumbled, "He liked you, Mommy. That's why he waited so long." I did not ask what that meant. I did not want to know. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I had stepped out of a long, fevered dream. The house was quiet, but not the heavy, smothering quiet of before, just peaceful. My husband kissed me on the forehead before he left for work, and I watched him walk down the driveway, the morning light making everything look softer, safer. I spent the day with my son, playing in the backyard and baking cookies. It felt like we were finding our way back to something normal, like the fear had been a storm that had finally passed. But even in that calm, there was a part of me that could not forget. At night, I still found myself standing at the window, staring out into the dark. I told myself I was just being cautious. But I think deep down, I wanted to see for myself that there was no one out there. The dreams came less often after that. When they did, they were softer, more like memories than nightmares. I dreamed of the man from college, of the way he had watched me, of the way he had whispered those words. But in the dreams, he was always just out of reach, like a shadow that could not step fully into the light. One night, as I was drifting off to sleep, I heard a voice in the dark. It was so soft I almost thought I imagined it. "Thank you for not forgetting me. it said. I lay there, frozen, my eyes wide open, but there was nothing there. No footsteps, no cold breath on the back of my neck, just the quiet hum of the house around me. I think that was when I understood that Mick, or whatever he was, had always been a part of me. A piece of fear I had never let go of, a memory that had found its way into the small spaces of my life. My son had given it a name, a face, but it had always been mine. In the weeks that followed, I did everything I could to fill the house with laughter and warmth. I invited friends over, filled the rooms with the smell of baking bread and fresh flowers. I wanted the walls to remember the sound of joy instead of whispers. I did not tell anyone else about Mick, about the drawings, the footprints in the attic. It felt like something that belonged to the past now, something I could leave behind. One afternoon, I took the box of letters and drove out to the edge of town where the river curved around the old mill. I stood on the bank, the water rushing past, and held the box in my hands. The wind was cold and sharp against my face, but it felt good, awake. I opened the box one last time, looked at the careful, curling script of the letters. I thought about the man who had written them, about the way he had tried to make his obsession into something permanent. Then I closed the lid and set the box in the water, watched as it bobbed once, then sank beneath the surface. When I got home, my son was waiting for me at the door. He smiled and said, "Did you find what you were looking for, Mommy?" I knelt down and kissed the top of his head. "I think so, sweetheart." That night, I slept with the windows open. The air smelled like rain, and for the first time in a long time, I did not dream of dark figures or quiet voices. Just the soft rhythm of the rain against the roof, the warmth of my son's laughter echoing through the walls. I do not know if Mick was ever really there, or if he was just a ghost of my past wearing a new face. But I do know that sometimes the things we fear most are the things we carry with us, even when we think we have left them behind. And maybe that is all right. Maybe the point is not to make them disappear, but to learn how to live with them, to let them be part of the story without letting them write the ending. So that is what I am doing, letting the past stay where it belongs, and filling the spaces it left behind with something warmer, something real. Because in the end, we are all just trying to find a way to feel safe again. And for now, that is enough. I am not the type of person who usually posts things like this. I work long hours, I am generally tired, and I do not spook easily. At least, I did not before all of this. I am writing this because I still cannot decide if I imagined it, if I am losing my mind, or if there really was someone else in the car that night. Even putting this down feels ridiculous, but something about the memory makes my stomach tighten every time I think about it. It started on a weeknight when I was driving home late after work. It was one of those shifts where you look up at the clock and realize it is almost midnight and you are the last one in the office. I live about 40 minutes away from work, so I knew I had a long, empty drive ahead of me. The roads were quiet, and the only sound was the low hum of the tires against the asphalt. About 15 minutes into the drive, I glanced up at the rearview mirror out of habit. That is when I thought I saw someone sitting in the back seat. It was quick, just a flash of shape where there should have been nothing, but it was enough to make my chest tighten. I remember the way my hands gripped the wheel automatically, white-knuckled, even though I tried to tell myself it was just a shadow. A trick of the streetlight through the trees, maybe. Still, the image stuck in my mind, a vague outline of a head and shoulders, just sitting still. I tried to shake it off. People imagine things in mirrors all the time, right? The mind fills in shapes where there are none. That was the explanation I went with as I kept driving, but my eyes kept darting back to the mirror, looking for confirmation. Each time I looked, the back seat appeared empty. Just my jacket thrown across the seat, nothing unusual. But that first glimpse had been so clear, I could not let it go. By the time I got home, I felt stupid for even being scared. I parked the car, grabbed my bag, and went inside without checking the back seat. The thought of opening the back door and seeing something I could not explain made my skin crawl. I told myself I was just tired, that exhaustion plays tricks on people. The next night, I worked late again. This time I was already thinking about what I thought I had seen the night before. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I forced myself to check the back seat thoroughly before even starting the car. I opened both rear doors, looked under the seats, and even shined my phone flashlight around like an idiot. Nothing. Just the same empty car it had always been. That should have been the end of it. I should have felt relieved. But all it did was make me question why I had been so certain about that shadow. If there was nothing there, then why did the memory feel so solid, like something had really been sitting there? Halfway through the drive, I noticed my reflection in the rear view looked strange. Not me exactly, but the way the darkness of the back seat framed my face. The shadows seemed deeper than usual, like the headrests faded into something darker than they should. I caught myself holding my breath, staring at that patch of black like it would blink back at me. Finally, I forced myself to laugh, shook my head, and said out loud, "Get a grip, man." My voice sounded small inside the car. The weirdest part was that after I said that, I felt calmer, like acknowledging how ridiculous I was being broke the tension. I turned on the radio, found some late-night station, and sang along badly just to fill the silence. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I was convinced I had gotten into my own head. But here is the part that I keep replaying. When I got out of the car that night, I swear I smelled something faint. Not exhaust or leather, but something sharp and chemical, a scent I did not recognize. I brushed it off as maybe cologne from one of my coworkers that clung to my jacket. But even as I walked inside, I noticed the smell lingered at the edge of my senses, like it was following me in. I could not place it. Not deodorant, not detergent, not soap. Just an unfamiliar cologne that seemed wrong in my car, wrong in my house. I tried to tell myself it was my imagination. That became my default explanation for everything. Imagination, shadows, exhaustion. Still, when I lay in bed that night, I could not shake the feeling that something had been sitting there, watching me drive, waiting. The image of it stayed with me, the faint outline of a head and shoulders, just tall enough to be seen in the mirror. Still, silent, too still, now that I thought about it. If someone was hiding in my back seat, I would expect to see movement, breathing, some kind of shift. But what I thought I saw was motionless, like a photograph taped against the glass. I rolled over and tried to sleep, but every creak of the apartment made my pulse quicken. I found myself checking my bedroom door 3 times, then 4, just to make sure it was locked. It was the same lock I had trusted every other night of my life. But that night it felt flimsy, like something determined enough could simply push it open. The truth is, I almost convinced myself to call in sick the next day. The thought of sitting in that car again made my stomach clench, but I did not. I went back to work, because that is what people do. You tell yourself you are being paranoid, that other adults would laugh at you if they knew what you were thinking. And maybe they would. But that does not make the feeling go away. That third night was when things changed. That was when it stopped being just shadows and fear and became something I could not explain away. But I will get to that. For now, I just need to emphasize how small it started. A shadow in the mirror, a strange smell. Nothing that would make sense if I told it to anyone else. But when you live through it, when you feel your own instincts screaming that something is wrong, you cannot ignore it. You can try, but the feeling stays. I did not know it then, But that was the first night I brought someone home with me. The next evening, I walked out to my car with a strange tightness in my chest. It had been one of those long, dragging workdays where the office fluorescent lights feel like they are drilling into your skull, and I just wanted to get home, eat something frozen, and collapse. But the whole time I was packing up my laptop and heading for the parking lot, I kept thinking about the drive, about that empty back seat that had not felt empty at all. I told myself I would be smart this time. Rational. If I checked the car before I even started the engine, then my brain could not trick me. That was the plan. So I unlocked the car, flung open both rear doors, and shined my phone light across the seats. Just empty upholstery, a few crumbs, the jacket I had left tossed to one side. I even crouched down and peered underneath like a paranoid man checking for monsters. Nothing. I stood there in the cold parking lot, feeling half stupid, half relieved. The first 30 minutes of the drive home were uneventful. The road was quiet, not many cars out at that hour. I had the radio on low, just enough to cover the hum of the tires. But somewhere near the halfway point, I caught it again, that scent. At first it was faint, barely noticeable, but it grew stronger with every mile. A heavy cologne, too sharp, almost chemical, not the kind of thing you would mistake for deodorant or soap. I rolled the windows down, thinking maybe it was just leftover from something spilled in the upholstery, but the air outside was crisp and clean. When I rolled them back up, the smell returned instantly, stronger now, like someone had sprayed it right beside me. My pulse spiked. I flicked my eyes to the rearview mirror. Nothing. Just shadows. I kept telling myself that smells linger, that sometimes they come out of nowhere, that there was probably a logical explanation. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I had never smelled it before. Not in my apartment, not at work, not on anyone I knew. It was unfamiliar, and it was in my car now. That was when I pulled over. Not gently either. I swerved onto the shoulder so fast the tires kicked up gravel. My hands were shaking as I killed the engine, flung open the driver's side door, and stepped out into the cold night air. The highway stretched out empty in both directions. I stood there with my breath clouding in front of me, listening to the quiet, trying to calm down. After a few seconds, I forced myself to circle the car. I opened the back doors again, checked the seats, ran my hand over the upholstery. Nothing, just my bag and jacket. I checked the trunk too, lifting the cover where the spare tire was stored. Nothing there either. Finally, I leaned against the side of the car, arms folded, trying to laugh at myself. I must have looked insane to anyone passing by, standing on the side of the highway, staring suspiciously into my own back seat. But there had been no one driving past. No headlights, no cars, just me, the car, and the smell that clung to me even after I stepped outside. When I finally convinced myself to get back in, the scent had faded. I drove the rest of the way home with every window cracked, shivering but unwilling to let the air inside sit still. By the time I pulled into my apartment complex, I almost believed I had imagined it. Almost. I slept badly that night, kept waking up to check the corners of my bedroom, listening for the sound of footsteps that never came. Every creak in the walls felt amplified, like the building itself was holding its breath. When my alarm finally went off at 7 in the morning, I felt more exhausted than when I had gone to bed. The next day was Saturday, and I decided to use it as a test. No late-night office, no exhaustion, no excuses. If the smell came back during the day, then I would know it was something in the car itself. So I ran errands, grocery store, hardware store, pharmacy. The whole time I was hyper-aware, sniffing the air like a lunatic, checking the rear view constantly. Nothing. The car smelled like old upholstery and takeout bags. Normal. That night, though, the pattern returned. I had gone to a friend's place for a few drinks and left a little after 11. As soon as I got onto the main road, I felt it again, that thick, intrusive cologne. This time it was so strong it made my eyes sting. I gripped the wheel so tight my hands ached, forcing myself to stare straight ahead. I could feel it in my chest, that instinctive animal awareness that you are not alone. Every nerve screamed at me to turn around, to confirm it, but I could not. If I looked and saw something, I do not know what I would have done. The whole drive, the smell never let up. It was like someone sitting inches from me, freshly drenched in that awful scent. I rolled the windows down until the wind roared in my ears, but it only seemed to push the smell forward, swirling it around me. When I finally pulled into my parking lot, I sat there for a full minute with the engine running, breathing through my mouth, trying to summon the courage to glance back. I never did. I just grabbed my bag, got out, and went inside as fast as I could, slamming the apartment door behind me like a child scared of the dark. I showered immediately, scrubbing my skin until it was red, but I swear the smell lingered in my nostrils. I lay awake in bed that night thinking about it, thinking about how smells usually have sources. Something you can point to. A bottle, a person, a spill. But this had no source. It appeared and disappeared at will, and the worst thought kept gnawing at me. Maybe it did not vanish at all. Maybe it just followed me in. The next day, I bought one of those little dashboard cameras. I told myself it was for peace of mind, that if something weird happened again, I could review the footage and prove to myself it was just my imagination. But part of me was hoping, or maybe dreading, that it would catch something real, because then, at least I would know. I set it up that evening, tested it, and felt a strange sense of relief seeing the red light blink, like having a witness riding along would make me safe. I drove to work, parked, and walked inside without looking back. For the first time in days, I felt almost normal. That night, though, when I reviewed the first set of footage, everything changed. When I first opened the dash cam footage, I half expected the file to be empty or corrupted. Some tiny part of me hoped it would not have recorded at all, because then I could still cling to the idea that everything was in my head. But the footage loaded just fine. I sat at my kitchen table with the lights dimmed, a beer sweating beside my laptop, and pressed play. The beginning was boring, exactly what you would expect from a dashboard camera. Just my hands on the wheel, the faint glow of streetlights whipping past, the occasional car zipping by in the opposite lane. For the first 10 minutes I felt stupid for even setting the thing up. And then I noticed the shadow. It started subtle, just a darker patch against the gray blur of the back seat. I leaned closer to the screen, squinting, trying to convince myself it was just bad lighting. But as the footage continued, the shape solidified. It was unmistakable, a man, sitting directly behind me. He was tall, or at least his frame suggested it, with shoulders too broad for the seat. His head was tilted forward slightly, so the top of his skull gleamed in the faint light. His face was pale and expressionless, eyes locked straight ahead, like he was staring through the back of my head. I paused the video, heart hammering. It had to be some kind of glitch, I told myself. Maybe a reflection or a trick of shadows. But when I skipped forward a few minutes, he was still there. Same posture, same empty stare, silent. I scrubbed through the entire drive, eyes wide, mouth dry. From the moment I pulled out of the parking lot until the second I shut the engine off at home, he sat there, unmoving, like a passenger, like he belonged there. I slammed the laptop shut and stumbled back from the table, breathing hard. My apartment was quiet except for the hum of the fridge, but every corner felt occupied, like I was being watched. I forced myself to reopen the laptop, desperate to prove it was just a mistake, but the video was still the same. The man in the back seat never moved, never blinked, just sat there like a shadow made solid. I could not sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined hearing the faint creak of springs, as if someone was shifting weight in the back seat of my car. At one point, I thought I heard footsteps outside my door, slow and deliberate, but when I checked through the peephole, the hallway was empty. The next morning, I told myself I had to delete the footage. If I kept it, I would just obsess over it, drive myself crazy. So I dragged the file to the trash, emptied it, and closed the laptop. For a moment, I felt a strange relief, like I had cut away the rot before it spread. But deep down, I knew it did not matter. Deleting the video did not change what I had seen. The day dragged on like a blur. I went through the motions at work, nodding along in meetings I did not hear, scribbling notes I would not remember. All I could think about was the man in the footage, his silent presence looming in my mind. When I got home that evening, I almost laughed at myself for how jumpy I had become. The car sat in the lot, ordinary and unthreatening. I stood there for a long time, keys in hand, staring at the back seat through the window. It looked empty, but I could not shake the feeling that empty did not mean alone. I made the mistake of thinking I was done with it, that deleting the footage had somehow severed the connection. But the next morning when I opened my apartment door, there was a plain white envelope sitting on the doormat. At first I assumed it was junk mail or a flyer. No return address, no stamp. Just my name scrawled across the front in shaky handwriting. My stomach sank as I tore it open. Inside was a single disc, an old blank DVD. I nearly dropped it when I saw what was written across the surface in black marker. One word: play. My hands shook as I loaded it into my laptop. The screen flickered to life, and I froze. It was the same footage, the dash cam video I had deleted. I watched in growing horror as the car rolled down the familiar streets, the pale figure in the back seat visible the entire time. But this version was different, longer. The footage continued past the moment I shut the engine off at home. The screen stayed dark, just faintly lit by the glow of my apartment complex. Minutes passed. Then the car door opened. My breath caught. The man shifted, slowly, deliberately, and leaned forward. His face filled the screen, pale and sharp, his mouth curling into a grin that made my skin crawl. And then, in a low rasp that rattled through the speakers, he spoke my name. I slammed the laptop shut so hard the screen rattled, stumbling back into the kitchen counter. My heart felt like it was trying to claw out of my chest. The apartment was silent again, but that silence felt alive, charged, like it was listening. I left the DVD sitting in the drive, untouched. I could not bring myself to throw it away, but I could not bear to watch it again either. I sat on the couch the rest of the night with every light on, too scared to even blink. Sleep never came. Every time I shut my eyes, I imagined that grin, that voice, the way it knew my name. When dawn finally crept through the blinds, I convinced myself it had been some kind of elaborate prank. Maybe someone hacked the dash cam, or maybe I was losing my grip entirely. But when I walked out to my car, the smell hit me again. That heavy cologne, stronger than ever. The upholstery was cold when I slid into the driver's seat, colder than it should have been, as if someone had been sitting there all night with the windows open. I drove to work with my hands clenched white on the wheel, refusing to look at the rearview mirror, and the whole way I swore I could hear it, breathing, slow, steady, just behind me. By the fourth night I was barely holding it together. Work felt like a blur, each day stretched thin by exhaustion and dread. I would sit through conversations and forget what was said the moment they ended. My boss pulled me aside to ask if I was all right, and I lied through my teeth, saying I had just been dealing with some bad allergies. In truth, I had not slept more than 2 hours at a time since that first night with the dash cam. Every time I drifted off, I woke in a cold panic, convinced I would find someone standing in the corner of my room. That night I tried something different. I set my phone up on the dresser with the camera recording while I slept. I figured if I could catch proof of something happening, maybe I would not feel so crazy. Maybe then I would know whether I was truly losing it or if something real was following me. The recording went for hours, silent, my body shifting under the blankets. But when I checked it the next morning, the footage ended abruptly at 3:17 in the morning. No explanation, no low battery warning, just stopped. That time was burned into my head because it was the same moment I had woken up, gasping, heart slamming in my chest. I had been so sure someone was in the room with me, though I could not see anyone. The closet door was slightly open, just enough for darkness to spill out. I stared at it until dawn, too afraid to move. The fear followed me everywhere. In the car, I kept the radio cranked to drown out the sound of my own breathing, because otherwise I thought I could hear his. My coworkers gave me a wide berth. A friend invited me out for drinks, and I nearly said yes, just to distract myself. But the thought of leaving my apartment after dark felt impossible. It was safer to hide inside, or at least that is what I kept telling myself. The smell of cologne lingered no matter what I did. I cleaned the upholstery, left the windows open, sprayed half a can of air freshener. Nothing worked. It was not my cologne. I did not even own cologne. It was heavy and old-fashioned, the kind that clung to your throat. Some mornings it was faint, barely noticeable. Other times it hit like a wave the moment I opened the car door, thick and suffocating. I tried to ignore it, but then came the sound. It started small, just a faint tapping when I was parked, as if a fingernail scraped across the back seat. I whipped around every time, always finding nothing. Then the tapping turned into a slow rhythm, like someone drumming on the leather. One night it grew louder, until it sounded like knuckles rapping against the inside of the trunk. That was when I decided to park 3 streets away from my apartment and walk home. I could not risk keeping the car so close anymore. I left it sitting there overnight, half hoping someone would break in and steal it. The next morning, it was still there, untouched. Except when I opened the driver door, there was a folded piece of paper on the seat. My name, written in the same shaky hand as the envelope with the DVD. I did not want to touch it. My stomach turned just looking at it. But I knew I had to. I unfolded the paper with trembling hands, bracing myself for some kind of threat. Instead, there were only 4 words. You are not alone. I dropped it like it burned me. My knees felt weak, and for a moment I thought I might throw up right there on the pavement. How the hell had it gotten inside the car? I had locked it. I always locked it. I stuffed the note into my pocket and stumbled back toward the apartment. The world looked sharper, too bright, like every passerby was staring at me, like they knew. I locked my door, double-checked it, and sat on the couch with all the lights on. I kept expecting another knock at the door, another envelope slid under the crack. That night, it escalated again. I woke to the sound of the baby monitor crackle. Except I did not have a baby monitor. The noise was coming from the nightstand. My old clock radio, the one I had not touched in years, hissed to life with static. Through the static came a low voice. I could not make out the words at first, but the cadence was there, slow, patient, like someone speaking directly into my ear. I froze, staring at the glowing red numbers. 3:17, always the same time. The voice broke through clearer, just a single phrase repeated over and over. I like this place. The smell of cologne filled the room. I could not breathe. My eyes darted to the closet door, hanging open a few inches wider than before. My throat tightened as I stared at that black gap. I knew, with a certainty that went deeper than logic, that he was standing in there, waiting. I wanted to run, to throw the door open and tear down the hallway, but my body would not obey. I lay frozen, every muscle locked, listening to the static, and that low rasp repeating the same words. I like this place. I like this place. When the radio finally went silent, the relief was almost worse. I sat up, drenched in sweat, and forced myself to move. I pushed the closet door shut with my foot, then piled a chair and my laundry basket against it. It felt childish, desperate, but it was all I could do. I sat like that until the sun came up, staring at the door, waiting for it to rattle. The next morning, there was another DVD on my porch. I had not even heard anyone drop it off. No envelope this time, just the disc, shiny in the early light. I carried it inside with shaking hands, already knowing what would be on it. I slipped it into the laptop and pressed play. The screen showed me asleep in bed, covers pulled to my chin, breathing slow. The camera angle was from the corner of the room, near the closet. My heart stuttered. There was no camera in my bedroom. I watched in horror as the footage continued. The closet door opened slowly, inch by inch, until the man emerged. The same pale face, the same black stare. He moved toward the bed with unnatural slowness, crouching low, crawling almost like an animal. He stopped beside me, watching me sleep. Minutes passed like that. Then he leaned close to the lens. His lips moved, though no sound came through. The video ended abruptly, screen black. My laptop reflection stared back at me. Behind it, in the glass, I thought I saw the faintest outline of someone standing just over my shoulder. I thought smashing the laptop would help. I grabbed it from the desk, snapped the screen back until it cracked, and slammed it against the floor again and again until plastic and glass splintered across the carpet. My chest heaved, my throat raw from screaming at nothing. The screen was black long before I stopped, but I could still see his face burned into my vision. That blank expression, the stillness, like he was patient enough to wait me out no matter what I did. I sat on the floor for a long time, shaking, trying to convince myself that maybe it was some elaborate prank. Maybe someone had planted cameras in my apartment. Maybe the DVDs were part of some cruel joke. The problem was, I lived alone. Nobody came in here except me. I double-locked my door every single night, and now I was starting to doubt whether locks even mattered. The smell was what finally broke me. That thick cologne, sharp and heavy, filled the room until I could taste it in the back of my throat. It came from nowhere, seeping into the air like smoke. I tore open every window, lit candles, sprayed air freshener until my eyes watered. None of it mattered. The smell clung to everything. It was his way of letting me know he was close. That day at work I was useless. My hands shook so badly I spilled coffee across the counter and snapped at a customer when she asked if I was okay. I was not okay. I kept seeing him reflected in the chrome of the espresso machine, in the glass of the pastry case, just behind me, waiting. Each time I turned, no one was there. But the reflection was always there first. I stopped answering texts from friends. I ignored calls from my mother. I could not explain what was happening without sounding insane, and worse, I did not want to drag anyone else into it. If this thing was attached to me, if it followed me home from that night on the road, then I was the problem. Anyone who got too close might end up on one of those DVDs too. The fifth night was when I finally snapped. I could not handle being in the apartment anymore. Every creak of the floorboards, every hum of the fridge felt like him moving closer. So I grabbed my keys and left, telling myself that if I just drove, maybe I could outpace it. I parked the car 3 blocks away, my old paranoia about keeping it too close forgotten. I needed to be inside the car, needed to feel the engine under me, the radio blasting, the wheels carrying me anywhere but home. For an hour I drove aimlessly through empty streets, windows down, the cool night air whipping in. The music was too loud, but it drowned out my thoughts, which was all I wanted. I began to feel like maybe I had outrun it, at least for the night, until I smelled it again. That cologne, thick and suffocating, curling through the car vents. My throat closed. I gripped the steering wheel hard enough to ache. The rearview mirror sat angled toward me, and I could not bring myself to look at it. Every nerve screamed at me not to. But eventually, against my will, my eyes flicked upward. For a second I thought it was empty, just the dim outline of the back seat. Then, faint but undeniable, the shape of a man, pale face, dark eyes fixed on me, sitting calmly, like he had been there the whole time, waiting for me to notice. I swerved hard, nearly hitting the curb. The mirror jolted and I lost sight of him. When I glanced back again, the seat was empty. My breath came in short, panicked gasps, my skin clammy with sweat. I pulled the car over, jumped out, and staggered onto the sidewalk with my hands on my knees, trying not to vomit. I left the car there, keys still in the ignition, and walked home. It took me nearly an hour, but I did not care. I would rather walk until dawn than spend one more second inside that vehicle. When I reached my building, the lobby was dark. The elevator creaked and groaned, but I forced myself inside, staring at the floor the whole ride up. The apartment was worse than ever. The cologne hit me like a wall the moment I stepped in. I gagged, stumbling toward the bathroom sink to splash water on my face. In the mirror, behind me, the door to the bedroom stood wide open. I had left it shut. I forced myself to check, gripping the doorknob with trembling hands. Inside, the air was freezing cold, so sharp it hurt my lungs. The closet door gaped open again, darkness spilling out. I piled the same chair and laundry basket in front of it, but I knew it was pointless. I had seen him walk straight through closed doors on the DVDs. That night, I did not even try to sleep in bed. I sat on the couch with every light blazing, the television on full volume, knife clutched tight in my hand. Hours crawled by. My eyelids burned, heavy, but I kept jolting awake the moment they drifted shut. Sometime after 3, the television screen flickered, not off, not quite. The picture warped into static, then cleared into footage of my own living room. The exact angle I was sitting in, couch and all, except in the recording, there was someone standing behind me. I spun so fast I nearly fell off the couch. Nothing, just empty air, bright with lamplight. I turned back to the screen, shaking. The figure in the recording leaned closer, close enough that I could see pale skin, the shadow of a grin. He reached toward the back of my neck, fingers brushing against hair. I felt nothing in the moment, but watching it made me retch. The screen cut to black. My apartment was silent, so quiet it rang in my ears. I sat frozen for what felt like hours, waiting for the next sound, the next movement. None came. The lights stayed on, the room empty. But I could not shake the certainty that he was closer now, closer than ever. When the sun finally broke, pale and thin through the blinds, I cried from relief. I had made it through another night, but I knew it was only borrowed time. Each day he came closer. Each day he made sure I saw a little more, smelled a little more, felt a little more. It was not going to stop until I understood what he wanted. And by then, I feared it would be too late. I woke up to silence so thick it felt like pressure against my ears. For a moment I thought I had gone deaf, because even the hum of the fridge, the usual creaks of the building were gone. Then the smell hit me. That cologne, suffocating and sharp, curling through the air like smoke from a fire. My chest tightened. I sat up on the couch, knife still clutched in my hand, and realized every light in the apartment had gone out. The only glow came from the television, though I knew I had turned it off before finally dozing. It was on again, the screen washed in grainy black and white footage. Not static, not something random. It was me. I watched myself sleeping on the couch, knife across my lap. I could see my own chest rising and falling. The footage was live, but the angle was impossible. It was as if the camera were floating just above my head, aimed down at me. I tried to move, but my body felt slow, heavy, as if the air itself was pressing down. On the screen, behind my sleeping form, a shape emerged from the hallway. At first, only pale hands appeared in the frame, gripping the door frame like someone steadying themselves. Then the rest of him leaned into view, tall and gaunt, his face exactly as I had seen in the rearview mirror that first night, blank, patient, like he had been waiting for this. The image froze, his face close to mine, lips parted. Then the screen cut black. A whisper slid through the room. "Look." I turned, heart slamming against my ribs, and saw him. Not on the screen this time, not a reflection or a recording. He stood in the hallway, half-shadowed, head bent to one side like a question. I raised the knife, but my hands shook so badly I could not steady it. He did not flinch. He stepped closer, the smell of his cologne filling the air until I gagged. "You brought me," he said, voice low and rasping. the same one from the farmhouse recording. Now I stay. Every instinct screamed to run, but where could I go? I had tried driving. I had tried hotels. I had tried burning the evidence. He followed everywhere. The knife felt like a child's toy in my hand, laughably useless against whatever he was. Something inside me snapped. I lowered the blade, not out of surrender, but out of clarity. If I kept running, he would keep chasing. If I kept ignoring him, he would keep finding ways to be noticed. He had followed me from that night in the farmhouse, attached himself somehow, and if he wanted me to acknowledge him, then maybe that was the only way through. My voice came out hoarse, raw. "What do you want from me?" He stopped, head tilting further until the bones in his neck cracked audibly. His grin widened, showing teeth too gray, too sharp. To ride. I thought about the footage, about him sitting calmly in the back seat while I drove, about the way he hovered just behind me, never attacking, just present. He did not want to kill me, not yet. He wanted to be carried, to be brought places, to exist where he could not on his own. "Then I stop," I said. My throat burned with the words. "I stop driving. I stop recording. I stop giving you anywhere to go." He studied me, those dark, reflective eyes unreadable. For the first time he looked uncertain. His grin faltered, his head straightened. The smell thinned slightly, like smoke caught in a draft. I forced myself to stand. My knees shook, but I kept going, step after step, until I was only a few feet from him. He was taller than I thought, his shoulders brushing the ceiling, his frame stretched wrong. But I kept my eyes locked on his. "You do not get to stay," I whispered. "Not here, not with me." For a moment, I thought he would reach out, grip my throat, end me right there. Instead, he stepped backward, dissolving into the shadows of the hallway. The smell vanished. The lights flickered once, twice, then came back on. The apartment was empty. My hands were empty too. I looked down and saw the knife lying on the floor. I did not even remember dropping it. That morning, sunlight filled the room for the first time in weeks without the haze of his presence. No cologne, no DVDs on the porch, no faces in mirrors. The quiet felt clean, like air after a storm. I quit my job that day, packed what I could into boxes, left the rest behind. I sold the car to a stranger who did not ask questions. I rented a new place across town, small and cheap, but mine. The first night I slept there, I dreamed of nothing. No footsteps, no whispers, just silence. It has been 3 months now. I keep waiting for the smell to return, for a new disc to appear, for his reflection to watch me from glass. But nothing has come. I live quietly, carefully. I avoid roads after dark. I keep no mirrors larger than a bathroom square. I have not set foot in another abandoned building, and I never will. Sometimes, though, I catch myself glancing at the closet before bed, or at the rear view when I borrow a friend's car. Just for a second. Just long enough to feel that old dread rise up again. And each time, I remind myself of the choice I made that night. I stopped giving him rides. I stopped playing host. I told him no. And for now, that has been enough. It showed up on a Thursday, late morning. I was working from home, half answering emails, half trying not to fall into a YouTube hole. It was one of those cold, gray days where everything feels like it's moving half a second slower than usual. The knock didn't even sound like a knock. It was more like someone thumped their fist against the door once, then walked away. I figured it was a delivery, so I opened the door and looked around. Nobody there. Just a small package sitting dead center on the welcome mat. No box markings, no Amazon tape, no shipping label, just plain brown cardboard sealed with duct tape, with a bright red fragile sticker slapped on the top like an afterthought. I didn't think much of it at first. I get deliveries all the time, work stuff. Junk I forgot I ordered, the usual. But something about this one bugged me right away. I picked it up and turned it over. No address, no sender, no postage. Not even my name. Just nothing. I looked up and down the street like maybe someone was pranking me, but everything was normal. Trash bins at the curb, leaves blowing across the sidewalk, no one in sight. I brought the box inside and set it on the kitchen table, sat down, stared at it for a minute. That's when the unease started creeping in, not panic or fear, just that off-center feeling you get when you walk into a room and forget why you're there, something not fitting into the pattern. Curiosity got the better of me. I grabbed a steak knife and sliced through the duct tape. Inside, nestled in crumpled brown paper, were two things. A black burner phone, still in its shrink wrap, and a flash drive. That's it. No note, no instructions, just those two items sitting there like a puzzle I didn't ask for. I took the flash drive out first. Standard USB, no markings. I plugged it into my laptop, more out of habit than logic. I think I was expecting some kind of weird spam file or a dumb prank video. Maybe someone in my building accidentally dropped it at the wrong unit. What opened was a folder, no name. Inside were video files, dozens of them. At first, I couldn't tell what I was looking at. Grainy, jittery footage. Some of it shot from high angles, like security cameras. Others were handheld. Phones, probably. Or dash cams. I clicked on the first one. A woman walking home from work. She had a tote bag, white sneakers, AirPods in. The camera followed her from a distance, staying behind trees and cars. At one point, she stopped to look at her phone, and the camera zoomed in, shaky, breathing audible in the background. My stomach turned a little. I clicked another. A different woman, this time at the gym. The angle was from behind a cracked locker door. She was tying her hair up. The camera lingered, moved closer. The next video showed someone's kitchen window at night, interior light on, a woman inside making tea. The camera sat still in the dark, filming through the glass. I opened 3 more files in quick succession. Different women, different places. Always the same thing. Someone watching. Not once did the women look at the camera. They never knew. I sat back, suddenly aware of how quiet the house was. It didn't feel like a prank anymore. I ejected the drive and shoved it back into the box. My hands felt weird, tingly, like they'd touched something hot, and the nerves were just starting to register it. I grabbed the burner phone next. Still in its plastic, brand new. I didn't open it. Not then. Instead, I called the non-emergency police line. I told them I received a suspicious package, that it contained possible evidence of stalking, maybe even a crime. They told me someone would follow up. I hung up and stared at the phone again. I didn't sleep well that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw one of those women from the videos looking over her shoulder, not because she knew she was being watched, but because she felt it. That stayed with me. The next morning, no one had called me back. By noon, I called the station again. got transferred twice, left a voicemail, never heard anything. That night, around 8:30, the burner phone rang. It was sitting on my desk, still sealed. The sound made me jump. I stared at it until the ringing stopped. It started again immediately. So I answered. There was a soft click, followed by a second of dead silence, then a voice. Distorted, filtered, hollow. You opened it, the voice said. It wasn't a question. That means it's yours now. Click. Dead line. No number, just unknown. I didn't sleep at all that night. I checked all the locks twice, left the porch light on. Every time a car drove past, I peeked through the blinds. Still nothing. But by the next morning, I started feeling watched, not from inside the house, outside. Like if I opened the door too fast, someone would be standing on the sidewalk pretending to tie their shoe, or if I stepped onto the porch, a camera shutter would click somewhere behind a parked car. Paranoia, maybe, but that doesn't mean it's not real. 2 days later, I saw the van. White, no logo, idling across the street, lights off. The windows were tinted. I couldn't see the driver. It sat there for about 10 minutes. Then it rolled away. I watched it disappear down the road, didn't chase it, didn't call anyone. Just stood there at the window, holding the curtain edge like it was a shield. Later that night, I went back through the drive. I looked at the footage frame by frame, faces, locations. One of the gym clips had a mirror in the background. I zoomed in. And there it was. The same white van, parked outside, partially obscured by trees. It wasn't just following them. It had been part of the story the whole time. I spent the next morning trying to convince myself it wasn't the same van. White vans are everywhere. Delivery drivers, contractors, maintenance crews. It didn't have to be the van, but that logic didn't stick for long. I kept flashing back to the video, that grainy reflection in the gym mirror. Same shape, same taillight sticker on the left corner. And it wasn't just that it looked the same, it was the way it parked, the way it sat. Lights off, engine running, facing my house. I didn't go outside that day, not even to grab the mail. I called the police again. This time I didn't go through the non-emergency line. I told them everything: the package, the burner phone, the drive, the van. They said an officer would swing by. I waited 3 hours. No one came. When I called again, they said my report had been noted, but there wasn't much they could do unless I had something actionable. No license plate, no footage, no confirmed threat. Just a gut feeling. I asked if they wanted the burner phone or the drive. They said, "You can turn it in if you'd like, but we can't guarantee follow-up." It didn't feel like a brush-off exactly, just bureaucracy doing what bureaucracy does, taking the teeth out of urgency. That night, I tried to distract myself, put on a movie, ordered takeout, kept the lights low, but I kept checking the window every 10 minutes, scanning the street for headlights. Nothing, until just after 11, when I went to brush my teeth and noticed something strange. My bathroom window doesn't face the front of the house. It faces the side, toward the alley. There's a narrow gap between my place and the neighbors, maybe 10 feet wide. just enough space for trash bins and weeds. As I leaned over the sink, I saw movement. I froze, toothbrush in hand. Someone was standing in the alley, just standing there. They weren't looking into my window. They were facing the other way, toward the back fence. But the posture was too stiff to be casual. No phone, no smoke, no motion at all. Just stillness. Like they were waiting for something. I shut the light off, then peeked again. Gone. No footsteps, no sound, just gone. I didn't sleep that night, again. The next day, I started making copies of the videos. I bought a fresh pack of drives, transferred everything from the original one, labeled each folder with the dates and timestamps that were embedded in the file data. I figured if anything happened to me, I needed someone else to have this, something to prove I didn't make it up. I emailed a copy to myself, sent another to a burner Gmail account I made that morning, hid one of the physical drives inside an empty cereal box in the back of the pantry. Paranoid? Probably. But it gave me some illusion of control, and that was better than nothing. Later that night, the burner phone rang again. It had been silent since that first call. I'd left it in a drawer, battery still full. When the screen lit up, it was the same as before, unknown number. No caller ID. No ringtone, just vibration. I let it buzz for a while, didn't want to answer. But eventually, I did. This time the voice was quieter, same distortion, but almost tired. "You're still watching," it said. I didn't respond. The voice waited, then said, "You shouldn't be." And then it hung up. I stood there holding the phone like it was radioactive. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I couldn't sit in Zoom meetings pretending I wasn't unraveling. I didn't even log on, just sent a vague email about feeling unwell. Instead, I drove. Nowhere in particular, just away. I put on sunglasses and a hoodie and took back roads out of town. Every time I passed a white van, I felt my pulse jump. I ended up at a rest stop about an hour outside the city, sat there for 20 minutes with the windows up, locked, engine running. Then I realized I was being watched again. Not by a person, by a camera. Mounted on the corner of the rest stop building, angled right at me. I know it sounds ridiculous. Of course I was being watched. It's a public area. Security is everywhere these days. But something about that moment hit me differently. For the first time since this started, I wasn't just afraid of whoever had sent the package. I was afraid of being seen with it, of being connected to it. Because what if someone had followed me? What if a camera somewhere picked up footage of me carrying that box inside my house? What if someone traced it back, scrubbed it to make it look like I was the one recording those women? That's when I finally understood what the voice meant. You opened it. That means it's yours now. I wasn't just a recipient. I was now part of the chain. When I got home, I checked every inch of my place. Not just the locks, but the vents, the smoke detector, the potted plants. I even unscrewed a light switch plate just to make sure nothing was behind it. No cameras, no wires. But when I turned on my computer to check the burner Gmail, the inbox had a new message. No subject, no body, just a link. I stared at it for a long time. Clicked it. It led to a private live stream, one that had already been playing for nearly 2 hours. It was footage of someone's apartment. Not mine, but familiar. A young woman, maybe mid-20s, working at her kitchen table, drinking coffee, typing something into her laptop, completely unaware. The stream had no chat, no name, no watermark. I refreshed the page, it kept going. I watched for a few more minutes, heart pounding. And then she looked up. Not at the camera, just into the room, like she'd heard something. She stood up, walked to her front door, looked through the peephole. She stayed there for a while. Then she walked back, sat down, and shut her laptop. The feed cut to black, and my screen stayed that way. No rewind, no playback. Just blank. I shut the laptop and sat in the dark. For a long time I didn't move. I just sat there with my hands on my knees, staring at nothing, trying to figure out what I was supposed to do now, what anyone would do. Because the truth was, I didn't know if what I'd seen had already happened, or if it was happening live. I didn't know who the woman was. I didn't know what I was watching. And I didn't know if I was the only one watching it. That was the part that got under my skin. Not the footage itself, disturbing as it was. Not even the idea that someone was out there recording strangers. It was the implication that I was expected to see it. Not as a witness, as a participant. That night, I pulled all the blinds in the house. Not just closed them, taped them down. I shut the laptop, unplugged the router, left my phone on airplane mode. Then I packed the burner phone and the flash drive into a shoebox, duct taped it shut, and shoved it into the bottom of my closet behind a stack of old coats I hadn't worn since college. I wanted to believe that if I physically distanced myself from it, if I pushed it far enough away, it would lose interest in me. Like a stray dog that would stop following if you stopped feeding it. That worked for a little while. For almost 3 full days, everything was quiet. No van, no calls, no emails. I tried to work, tried to act like a normal person again. I even went out for groceries, walked the longer route around the neighborhood, just to keep my head clear. It was cloudy that day, drizzling, that kind of slow, soft rain that makes you feel like time is passing slower than it really is. It almost felt normal. Until I got home and found the envelope. It had been slid under my door, thick manila, no writing on it, not sealed. I picked it up slowly, already feeling that sinking weight in my stomach return. Inside were photos. Printed, glossy, full color. The first few were of my house, different angles. From the street, from the alley, one from my backyard near the fence line. Then they moved inside. Shots through my windows, me at my desk, me brushing my teeth, me eating on the couch with the TV on. But it was the last photo that nearly made me drop the envelope. It was a picture of me asleep, in bed, taken from inside the room. I stood there for a long time just holding it, chest tight, every part of me buzzing. It wasn't just that someone had been in the house. It was that I didn't know when. There had been no forced entry, no signs of a break-in. The locks were untouched, the windows all still latched. The alarm system, which I'd finally started using, had never gone off. Nothing. I tore through the house again, checked everything. Closets, crawl space. Even inside the vents, nothing. I found the shoebox still in place, unopened, untouched. That somehow made it worse. I called the police again. This time I didn't go through the formalities. I told them someone had been in my house and left behind surveillance photos. I told them it wasn't a prank, that I felt unsafe, that someone was stalking me. They said they'd send someone. An officer showed up an hour later. Young guy, polite but skeptical. He looked through the photos, took a few notes, asked if anything was missing. I told him no, just that they'd been inside. He asked if I had roommates, any exes who might want to mess with me. I said no. Then he asked if I had any enemies. That one caught me off guard. I almost laughed. What does that mean? Like people who want to kill me? He shrugged. Sometimes it's not about killing, just control or chaos. There are people who do stuff like this for fun. They like watching what happens when you know you're being watched. That stuck with me. They like watching what happens. He filed a report and said they'd follow up if anything came of it. I didn't believe him. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because of fear, exactly. Not even because I thought someone might come back. It was something else. This deep, creeping suspicion that I'd already crossed some invisible line. That it didn't matter what I did now. The door was open, and I hadn't closed it in time. The next morning, I called in sick again, made coffee I didn't drink, sat on the couch flipping through the photos until my hands went numb. Then I opened the laptop again. The live stream was gone. The link led to a blank page now, 404 not found. I checked the email it came from, deleted. The burner Gmail account had been wiped too. Everything I'd sent to it was gone. I tried the other drive's copies I'd made, backups I thought were safe. 2 wouldn't open. The third one had files, but when I clicked them, every video showed static. Corrupted. I dug the shoebox out from the closet and opened it. The original flash drive was gone. So was the burner phone. In their place was a note, typed in all lowercase on a strip of plain white paper. You don't need these anymore. That was it. No threats, no instructions, no explanation. Just confirmation. They'd been in my house again. Not just once, again. And they hadn't taken anything. They hadn't destroyed anything. They'd replaced the evidence with a message. They wanted me to know. That afternoon, I put everything I had left, the photos, the note, even the shoebox, into a garbage bag and drove it to the far side of the city. I tossed it into a random construction dumpster and walked away without looking back. I didn't know if it would help, but it was something. When I got home, there was nothing on my porch, no envelope, no phone call, no new emails. Just silence. For the first time since this started, I felt something close to peace. But it didn't last. Because just after midnight, my phone buzzed. Not the burner. My real one. And there, in my messages, was a single photo. Blurry, low resolution, but unmistakable. It was a picture of the woman from the live stream. This time she was asleep, and the photo had been taken from inside her room. I stared at the photo on my phone for a long time. I didn't save it. I didn't delete it. I just stared, like maybe if I looked long enough, I'd see something new, a detail I missed. A reflection in the mirror, a shadow in the corner, anything that would help me understand what I was actually looking at. But it was just her, the woman from the live stream, asleep in her bed. Same room, same blankets, same worn headboard, same angle as before, same sickening implication. Someone had been in her home, standing right there, just feet from where she slept. And somehow, they'd sent it to me. My personal number, not the burner, not email, me. I didn't know what to do. I didn't even know what this was anymore. It wasn't just voyeurism. It wasn't a prank. It wasn't a trap, not in the traditional sense. This was something else, something deliberate, slow, like someone winding a clock, watching to see how long it would take for me to break. I tried calling the number back. Blocked. I tried saving the image, forwarding it to my computer, to my work account, to anywhere outside my phone. Every attempt failed. File cannot be transferred. Unsupported format. Corrupted attachment. But I could still see it, clear as day. I called the police, again, told them someone had broken into my home twice, had sent me a photo of a sleeping woman taken inside her bedroom. They asked if I knew her. I said no. They asked if I had the original message. I said yes. They told me to come in the next day and file a report in person. That was it. No urgency, no visit, no follow-up. Just a clipboard and a desk if I wanted it. I didn't sleep that night, again. I sat on the couch with all the lights on and tried to reason through it. Was this just punishment? For opening the box? For not reporting it soon enough? For seeing too much? Was I being warned? Or was I being invited? Because the more I thought about it, the more it started to feel like they didn't want me to run. They wanted me to watch. To keep watching. And every time I tried to pull away, they sent something new. A reminder that I was still part of this, whether I liked it or not. The next morning, I didn't go to the police station. I just couldn't. I didn't have anything solid. A blurry photo, a wiped flash drive, a phone that vanished from my own locked closet. It all sounded insane when I played it back in my head. Like something a person makes up when they're having a breakdown. Instead, I called in sick again. I couldn't even remember the last time I worked a full week. That afternoon, I started researching. Not on my main laptop. I used an old one I kept in the closet, barely functional, something I hadn't touched in years. I didn't log into any accounts, no Wi-Fi. Just tethered it to a mobile hotspot and started digging. I looked up missing persons in my area, surveillance crimes, burglary cases where nothing was taken, women who'd gone to the police about being followed but were dismissed. I combed through forums, comment sections, weird Reddit threads that skirted the edge of being removed. And I started seeing patterns. Most of the cases weren't connected by location or method. They didn't even fit the same age groups or neighborhoods. But they did have one thing in common. No one ever believed them. Most reports were dropped. The people who filed them stopped following up. In a few of the older threads, the original posters deleted their accounts entirely. One thread stood out. It was short, only 3 comments. The subject line just said, "I saw the van. What happens now?" The original post had been removed. So had the user. But someone had replied, a user called Passenger Seat, with an old account that hadn't posted since. The comment was simple, just 3 sentences. Don't try to track them. Don't call the cops again. Whatever you do, don't open the second package. That's what froze me. The second package. I hadn't received one. Not yet. But the way the message was written, not if, when made it clear that this was part of the pattern. You get one, you engage, and if you keep watching, they send another. An escalation. I shut the laptop and packed it back into the closet. And then I waited. I didn't want to. I didn't have a plan. But what else was there to do? The police wouldn't help. No one I knew would believe me. I couldn't send the photos, couldn't save the evidence, couldn't even hold on to the original hardware without it vanishing or corrupting. All I could do was try to stay ahead of whatever was coming next. But I didn't have to wait long. 2 nights later, it came. Same time, around 10 at night, just after dinner, while I was pretending to read. Another knock. Soft, just one. When I opened the door, no one was there. Just a box. Same duct tape, same red fragile sticker, same silence. I didn't bring it inside. Not this time. I left it on the porch, just stood there staring at it, heart pounding, hands shaking, trying to decide what to do. I grabbed my phone, took a photo of it. The screen went black as soon as I pressed the button. Just shut off completely. When I turned it back on, the image wasn't in my gallery. I tried again with a spare phone I'd bought the day before. Nothing. The moment the camera pointed at the box, the screen glitched and froze. It was like the box couldn't be recorded, couldn't be saved. I left it there overnight. In the morning, it was gone. No footprints, no tire marks, no sign it had ever been there at all. Just my porch, empty again. And in the middle of my welcome mat, a single item left behind. A key. I didn't touch the key for over an hour. I just stared at it from the other side of the glass door like it might disappear again if I blinked too long. It was small, brass, and worn smooth. No markings, no tag. Just a single, ordinary key lying in the center of my welcome mat like it belonged there. I opened the door and crouched down slowly, trying not to make any sudden moves. I don't know why. I was alone. But it felt like I was being watched again, and this time I didn't even bother to look for the van. I picked the key up. It was cold. No note, no box, no explanation. I took it inside, set it on the table, and backed away from it like it might bite. I didn't touch it again all day. That night, I stayed up scrolling through every locksmith forum I could find, looking at key types, blank codes, anything that might help me figure out what kind of lock it fit. I learned more than I ever needed to about pin tumblers, warded locks, and how many possible cuts a standard house key can have. None of it helped. I tried it on every door in my house. No match. I didn't expect one, but I had to check. At 2 in the morning, I was still sitting at the kitchen table, staring at it under the overhead light like it might start speaking. I remember thinking, what if I'm not supposed to use it yet? What if I already have? That's when I noticed the envelope on my counter. It hadn't been there earlier. I was sure of it. Smaller than the last one, plain white, no name. Inside was a photo, just one this time. It was me, walking. Not recent, it had to be at least a month old. I was wearing my blue jacket, the one I lost on the train back in March. I was crossing a parking lot toward my old apartment, earbuds in, head down, completely unaware. But the angle it was taken from was strange, too high for a normal person. I flipped the photo over. A date was scribbled on the back in black marker. Not the day the photo was taken, tomorrow. That's when I started to understand. The key wasn't for something here. It was for something else. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I sat on the edge of my bed with the key in my hand and the photo face down beside me, trying to piece together what was happening. They weren't just watching me anymore. They were guiding me. Not with threats, not with force. With permission. That's what the key felt like. Not an order, not a message. An invitation. And for the first time since this all started, I wasn't afraid in the same way. I wasn't sure if that made it better or worse. I left the house early the next morning. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I didn't bring my phone. I didn't take the car. I walked, with the key tucked into my jacket pocket and the photo in my back pocket, folded in half like it was mine. I didn't know where I was going until I got there. It was an old self-storage facility on the west side of town. I'd passed it dozens of times over the years, but never paid much attention. It had one of those faded signs with crooked letters and a number to call that no one ever answers. The front gate was open. No one at the desk. The place was empty, quiet. Rows of steel doors stretching down long concrete corridors that smelled like dust and oil and old cardboard. I didn't need a map. I turned left, then right, then stopped at Unit 37. The door was painted red, same color as the fragile sticker. The key slid into the lock like it had been waiting. I hesitated just for a second. Then I turned it. The latch popped with a soft clunk. The overhead bulb in the corridor flickered once. Then I lifted the door. Inside it was dark. No light, no motion. Just shelves. Floor-to-ceiling metal racks, maybe 10 feet deep. Every inch of them filled with cardboard boxes, all identical. Same size, same duct tape, same red sticker. Some were labeled, some weren't, some had names, most didn't. There had to be hundreds of them. I stepped inside. It felt like walking into a library where nothing had ever been read. I ran my fingers along the boxes, not really sure what I was looking for. And then I saw it. A box with my name on it. Printed in bold marker across the top flap. Underneath, A date. Today's date. I opened it. Inside was a phone. Not a burner this time. A smartphone. Standard. Black case. It vibrated the moment I picked it up. No lock screen, no password. Just a single open window. A video. I pressed play. It was a live stream. Of me, standing in the storage unit, holding the phone. I looked up, then back down at the screen. The feed was live. No delay. A perfect mirror, 1 second behind. I turned slowly, heart hammering, scanning the corners of the unit. No visible camera, no sound. Just the quiet hum of the corridor bulb and the echo of my own breathing. Then, on the screen, a second video window popped open. Split screen. On the right, a live feed of someone else, a woman, not the one from before, a different one, walking through her apartment, towel on her head, brushing her teeth. No awareness that anyone was watching. Below the video were 2 buttons, archive and forward. That was it. No names, no instructions, just options. I stood there for a long time. I don't know how long. Eventually, I put the phone back in the box. I closed the lid. I locked the unit behind me. I walked home. That was 4 days ago. No more packages have come. No more photos, no more knocks, no more vans. Just silence. But sometimes at night, I still think about those 2 buttons. Archive, forward. And I wonder how many people actually press them. I never told anyone about the storage unit. Not the police, not my coworkers, not the few friends I still talk to, not even my brother, who's the kind of guy who would believe me without asking for proof. Because that's the thing about stories like this, once you say them out loud, they stop sounding real. The more detail you give, the less anyone believes. It becomes easier to assume something's wrong with you, not the world. Safer too. So I stayed quiet. The phone stayed in the box. The box stayed in the unit. And the key stayed in my desk drawer, where I could see it every morning when I reached for my wallet. For the first few days, I didn't sleep much. Every little noise at night made me freeze. I kept checking the window, waiting to see the van again, but nothing came. Not a sound, not a message. The air around me stopped vibrating. It was like they were done with me. And for a while, I believed that. But then something strange started happening. I started noticing other people. Not in the obvious sense. Not staring at me or following me. Not others, like you see in movies, lurking in black coats. Just other people. At coffee shops, on the bus, at the library, people who sat too still, who didn't touch their drinks, who didn't scroll their phones, people who watched. Not me, just everything. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. A certain stillness, a focus, like they're waiting for something to happen, and they already know what it's going to be. That's when I understood. I hadn't been singled out. I'd been inducted, not into a club, not a cult, just a system, a pattern, something old and invisible and quiet that most people pass by without ever noticing. But once you open that first box, you stop being most people. It's been 3 weeks since I went to the storage unit. I went back once. I told myself I wasn't going to open the box, that I just needed to know if it was still there, but I already knew it would be. Same box, same phone, same 2 buttons. Only this time, there were more names on the shelves. Labeled, tagged, dated. I didn't recognize any of them, but one of them near the bottom, close to the wall, had today's date on it, just like mine did the first time. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. The phone in my box vibrated when I touched it, the same way it did before. It lit up on its own. There was no live stream this time, no face, just text. You understand now. I didn't reply. I put it back and left. When I got home, there was nothing on the porch, nothing in the mail, nothing under the mat. But there was a man sitting on the bench across the street. Middle-aged, business casual, paper cup in hand. He never looked at me. But I knew. He'd opened his box, too. That's how this works. You're given a glimpse, a key, a choice, and whether you use it or not, you're marked by it, changed. Your role begins the second you know. There's no ceremony, no reward, no speech. Just silence. And responsibility, because this isn't a chain of violence. It's a chain of observation, and now I'm part of it. It took me a while to make peace with that. At first, I thought I'd go to the police again, try to push harder, bring them the key, demand an investigation, but what would I say? That I was being watched by people who didn't threaten me. That I was sent a phone that let me look into people's lives, and instead of turning it over, I kept it. That I was curious? There's no way to say that and come out clean. So I chose something else. I made a decision. I went to the unit one last time. I brought a fresh phone, factory reset, no accounts. I opened the box, picked up the original phone, and watched the screen light up again. Another stream. Another woman. Different this time, older. Maybe in her 50s, watering plants, listening to music, completely unaware. Below her feed, the buttons. Archive, forward. I didn't touch them. Not for a long time. And when I finally did, I pressed archive. The screen went black. That's all that happened. No confirmation, no sound. Just gone. I put the phone back in the box and closed the lid. When I stepped outside, the sky was just starting to turn. That soft pink blue that comes before sunrise, where the air smells faintly like electricity. The world was still the same. But I wasn't. I didn't feel proud or brave. I just felt steady, like I'd finally settled into whatever this is. And now, I think I understand my place. I don't get to walk away, but I do get to choose. Every day. What to see, what to pass on, what to stop. And maybe that's the point. Maybe this whole thing doesn't exist to create harm, but to decide who lets it happen, who passes it forward without thinking, who looks, shrugs, and clicks. There are more units, more shelves, more boxes, more people waking up to a world that doesn't quite fit the shape they thought it had. And some of them will press forward. But not me. Not today. Tomorrow, maybe, but not today.